Section 1 of Sidelights of Nature in Quill and Crayon. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Sidelights of Nature in Quill and Crayon by Tickner Edwardes. Preface, Chapters 1 and 2. Preface. In the following pages, no attempt has been made to bring to light any new fact in natural history. The papers are laid before the notice of the reader for as much or as little as they are worth, and lay claim to no more importance than may be attached to them as earnest records of happy solitary rambles, in storm or sunshine, year in and year out, among the green woods and meadowlands of Kent and Sussex. Of the 18 chapters, 5 only are reprints. Nature's Pessimist appeared in the Pall Mall Gazette, November Gold in the Globe, and Voices of the Night, Wildflowers of Winter, and Dull Days in the Echo. My best thanks are due to the editors of these papers for permission to reproduce, which has been so courteously given. Signed, Edward Tickner Edwardes. Chapter 1. On the Threshold of May. The years at the spring, and days at the morn, mornings at 7, the hillsides dew-pearled, the larks on the wing, the snails on the thorn. God's in his heaven, all's right with the world. By Robert Browning. With the first dim break of the amber dawn came the promise of a hot day. The dew lay white and thick in the meadow, and where the gossamer swung in the hawthorn hedge, every filament bore its load of diamond dust tremblingly in the rosy light. As the sun climbed higher and higher up the blue steep of the cloudless sky, the mild south wind that had freshened with the dawn lulled again, until at length hardly a breath of air stirred among the rooks' nests, darkening the tops of the great elm trees in the lane. Full and clear from the heart of the greenwood came the blackbird's song, as he chanted the red morning from misty lair. While yet the first grey thread of the dawn wavered up into the starshine, he had awakened the whole wood with his sudden fluting. The nightingale, silent at last from her long harmonious vigil, burst out again, heart-worn and weary, into silver song. The grey thrush piped in the hazel green. The cuckoo began his seesaw melody far away in the deep wood. With the lifting day came other voices to swell the forest chiming. The deep clamorous note began in the rookery hard by. Larks swept up from the dew-white meadow, cleaving the morning air with their blithe song. Now and again a long hailing note, sylvan and sibilant, rang out from the hollow wood. The clear trumpeting of a pheasant hurtled in the distant game preserve. Jays filled the deep carvet with their rich, discordant cry. Then, when at last the broad day glittered on everything, the voices ceased one by one as the wood people scattered in search of provender. And, with the gathering quiet, the humming of bees in the wild cherry bloom grew until it filled the green wilderness with its deep murmuring note. In a drift of green and gold, the meadow slants down to the stream below, carrying its burden of cowslip blossom right to the water's brink. Long ago, the hot April sun has licked up the last white patch of morning dew from the grass, although the shadows of the great elms still stretch their cool barriers of purple-grey far out into the broad expanse of sunshine. On every living and growing thing, the bright sloth and cheery hastelessness of the morning seems to have cast its drowsy spell. The blackbird has begun his mellow chanting in the deep wood again, but his voice has a lazy ring in it, as if he were dozing on his shadowed perch as he sings. The clamour from the far-off rookery has dwindled down to a soft, restful note, rising and falling idly on the gentle air. Chaffinches are singing everywhere in the hedgerow, yet all the wonted hurry and bubble of their song seems melted away into the hazy gold of the morning. The cry of the cuckoo is almost continuous. From every hill and hollow of the green countryside, its clear twin melody chimes out through the quivering air, and seems as if it were the very sound equivalent of sunshine, light and music linked together in the bright mirage of the April day. Under the hawthorn hedge, the grass of the meadow is soft and thick, and, as we lie down among it, there arises an odour of green, of crushed clover leaves and stems of sorrel bruised into scent-giving. The gentle wind creeps into our emerald shelter, and hovers round the ear with the sound as of a silken ribbon drawn over a delicate seashell. The sunbeams play on the young hawthorn leaves above, and seem to bring down with them some of the essence of the song-burdened air. For an indescribable tone halo, something between sound and silence, lies among the bursting green. Even the very earth itself, warmed in the sweet vernal rays, seems to be imbued with a faint shadow of harmony, which touches, yet does not penetrate, the ear. Looking out over the shimmering plain of the meadow to the wood beyond, we can see that all the forest trees have given way at last to the strong spring sunshine. Young oak spray fills the wood with flaunting gold. Everywhere the great black ash buds have changed into verdant tassels of light. The chestnuts are vast candelabra of green, with the brown tapers all ready for the kindling. And the ruddy brown of budding beech glows in every azure hollow of the undulating woodland. The brook is the one busy, restless thing in the golden April morning. Out of the rich gloom of the hazelwood it springs, dancing and frothing over the green draped stones of its tortuous bed, and filling the quiet, dark pools under the bankside with its bubbling, swirling agitation. Where it leaps first into the drowsy sunlight of the meadow, great white discs of elder bend down on their green stems, solemnly to the water's edge, as if to check the unseemly mirth of its flowing. But the brook only sparkles the more for the staid reproof, and sweeps on singing through its broadening shallows, where, in ribbons of silver light, the crowsfoot blossom divides the clear brown water into a dozen rippling channels. Marsh marigolds crowd down to the brookside, pushing out their tangled knots of gleaming yellow far into the hurrying water to stem its headlong flight. Yet the bright iridescent stream leaps by as unheedingly as ever, now and again stripping one golden blossom from its would-be mentor's ragged finery, and hurrying it along with the rest of its varied burthen of leaf and petal, garnered on its long journey through the rainbow labyrinth of the wood. All the birds come at some time to the brook. The blackbird drinks for a moment at its oozy margin, then sails away noisily towards the elm covert. Larks rise singing from its green banks. Starlings pipe to it. The great crow flutters down to it, and his black shadow plunges slantingly into its limpid depths, sombring the stones of its bed. The martin, with his steel blue sheen, sweeps off the sunny meadow like a glittering lance every now and again, to take one long skimming flight low down on the water's face. But the brook merely touches his drooping wing with a diamond or two, then hurries on, ever with the same glad sudden note of child joy uttered to itself as if in very wonder at the light. Yet the sun-steeped meadow, with its paving of green and gold, marks only one brief moment in the life of the brook. Soon, with one last sparkle and one last clear ripple of song, it sweeps into the green gloom of the willow wood under the hill, and its bright arpeggio dies away in the grey reeds' whispering, and the swish of red osier wands islanding its leaf-strewn bed. Then, ever broadening and deepening, the dark water swings silently along under the gold-fretted arabesque of green, until presently it opens out and loses itself in the placid old mill pond, gently dozing under the heat of the noontide sun. The old deserted, ruined mill stands on the brink of the pool, dipping its silent grass-grown wheel deep into the brown pellucid water. Neglected apple trees, almost as old as itself, hem it on either side, lifting their gnarled and twisted branches caressingly against its tottering wall, and nearly hiding the green weather-worn timber in a drift of rosy blossom. For half a lifetime the ancient mill has been still and silent, slumbering almost as peacefully as its former tenant, the old white-haired miller, laid long ago to rest in his dim nook under the rowens of the churchyard. The old mill wheel droops into the quiet sunny water, trailing its long green tresses in the gentle flow. Silver carp rise slantingly from the limpid deep, and nibble at the waving fronds, or, with open mouths, break the surface of the water for a moment, as if they came to take a draught of the mellow spring sunshine chequering the pool with its hazy light. Where the water lies motionless in a deep bay, pale discs of lily green spangle the surface, with here and there one silver button gleaming under the lip of the stream. Intensely silent and solitary is the old mill pond, hidden away in its deep woodland setting. A steady drone from bee and beetle clings in the drowsy sunlight, yet only serves to make the solitude and silence more profound. Now and again dark waterfowl plunge into the glassy depths with a clear ringing splash, reappearing presently far away down by the silver-crested weir. Or a heron lifts up her wan, care-ridden voice from the drab thicket of reeds beyond. Sometimes the blue lightning flash of a kingfisher glitters for a moment across the water, or, poised over midstream, a gorgeous dragonfly winnows the sluggish air with his crimson sheen. But none of the villagers ever take the footpath by the mill pond now, and the ancient mill house, with the blue sky gleaming here and there through its dilapidated roof, is given over to the bats and the martins. Rumour has long been busy with it down in the village. Years and years ago something was dragged for and found in the deep water hard by, so the tale goes, that never came there of its own undoing. And in the alehouse parlour of gusty winter's nights, strange stories are often told about the place, of pale, uncanny lights seen by the chance wayfarer flickering in its deserted windows, of the clank and rumble of the ancient machinery set in work again by no mortal hand, and heard, it is said, a mile away when the moon drives giddily through the grey cloud flock of the autumn night. And so the old mill, shunned and forsaken, broods away the long years in never-ending solitude, and the willows grow green around it, and the apple boughs lift their red rosettes against its sunny moss-girt walls, and none but the brook comes through the deep wood to see it decked in its springtide garland of leaf and blossom. That concludes Chapter 1. The section continues with Chapter 2. The Night Attack. Swift ran the searching tempest overhead, and ever and anon some bright white shaft burned through the pine-tree roof, here burned and there, as if God's messenger through the close wood screen plunged and replunged his weapon at a venture. By Robert Browning. From the north came the slow evening wind, chilly and inconstant, ever drooping and veering as the sun dipped lower and lower towards the vague mist of the earth-line. Deep red clouds, long and golden-edged, barred the steep sky up to the zenith, and through the ruddy trellis gleamed a distant plain of pale sea green, changing imperceptibly below into clear, luminous crimson, where lay the hollow sun-disk already cut by the sierra of the purple hills. With the last red flare of the sun, the halting breeze lulled, then died away in the tree-tops, and a heavy silence, grim and oppressive, came down over the earth like a thick, impenetrable pall. The woodland voices ceased their mellow chiming. The nightingale in the green alder hurried her sad recitative, as if some undefined foreboding held her to timorous utterance. Even the droning of the distant sea had in it a hoarse, unwonted cadence, as though the swing of bygone tempests still surged in its deep heart and vexed it in its rocky solitude. In the western sky, where the sun-brow had vanished but a moment before, one little bright fleck of cloud flame still hovered in the crimson air, as if to mark the place of the sun's descending. All the lower cloud bars, filling the pale dome above, were wreathed in fierce fire, and the dense upper strata glowed dully with a scumble of amber. A rim of deep grey banking lowered, heavy and solid, all round the horizontal line, with great billowy masses of reddened cloud peering over from beyond, into the dark, still arena of the evening mists. Presently the long striae right above the sundown broke up slowly into soft dapples of orange light, and the distant pale green air filled everywhere with a flock of golden plumes. For a while the afterglow streamed in red wrath up the pale arch of the west, flooding high heaven with its deep, effulgent glory. Then swiftly the pale pall of the sluggish night shut down fold upon fold. Azure and gold and crimson melted away alike before its heavy vaporous touch. On the dark smoky earth brink a low narrow line of bright red feathers lay curling together for a brief moment. Then this last vestige of colour swamped out in the watery drift, and sky and cloud were distinguishable in the new dark of the night only as different tones of chilly grey, with the grim menace of the eastward banking looming ashy white against the deeper grey of the sky beyond. The deep spring night lay close on field and forest, but with the dark, the silence that had hushed the spent sun to his red outspanning gloomed down over the shadowy land like a stifling miasma. The night creatures, whose wont it is to fill the deep wood with their calling, were voiceless in their leafy corridors. No rich, clear note from insect wings swept by through the pent air. Only the lilt of the far-off sea rose and fell with a hoarse rhythm of foreboding. And out on the misty gloom of the marshes, a belated curlew cut the tense silence with her shrill, jangling note, as she scoured to and fro disconsolately over the reedy waste of water. Slowly the dense eastward pack of horizontal cloud shredded asunder, and the callow moon stood out, green and glittering, through the fringe of the rising storm rack. The pallid beams caught in the distant elm tops weirdly. For a moment a heaving pathway of pale fire shot across the salt face of the sea, silvering the dark breaker crests as they fell in a long diagonal sweep on the rattling beach. Then the pale moonlight swamped out in the driving mist. Night claimed her own again, and the faint, troubled voice of the oncoming tempest rang hollow and clear out of the distant dark. Blacker than the black night rose the storm cloud from the lap of the moaning sea, towering higher and higher in the deep Cimmerian sky as it swept on. And the strong west wind sprang suddenly out of the far-off hills and came whistling and sighing over the grey marshes to meet it. Jagged and deep-voiced and lurid with internal light, it spread, streaming against the ineffectual breeze that grew moment by moment into a hurricane, yet failed to stay it in its fierce galloping onslaught. Already the foremost masses of cloud stretched ragged and black overhead, and the first slow heavy raindrops beat hot on the face as we made for the distant oakwood, fighting the mad wind torrent at every step. Yet not for its shelter we came to the deep wood, not to crouch like cattle dry-skinned under the roar of the rain, but pressing on through the barbed undergrowth heavy with the scent of bluebells, we reached the hillside clearing where one great solitary tree, a very giant of its kind, rears its huge canopy far above all the rest of the wood. Then on with the climbing irons, and up into the dark oak labyrinth above, until, panting and breathless, we gain the highest bough that can bear our weight, and hang swinging in the tumbling, tossing foliage, while the rain rages down Niagara-like around us, and the full, wild life of the tempest gathers swiftly overhead. Deep darkness filled with the scream of the rain, and the fierce wind barking and yelping like a pack of hellhounds in full cry. Then sudden vivid light, and the green tangle of our eyrie grows glistening green. The whole wood flashes out in bright colour below, and the distant village steeple gleams for a moment steel blue in its setting of red cottage roofs. Black blinding night again, and in another instant the deep thunder tumbles crackling along the floor of the heaven, peal upon peal, until at last it sinks and dies away, muttering in the far-off hills. Wild roar of rain and wind, and then the broad flickering light again. The beaten earth glitters up once more, weirdly green under the rack of the tempest, and once more the terrible storm voice hurtles out through the black cloud steamers, making the fierce torrent dumb under its cataract of deep reverberation. Then leaping light and crashing thunder peals following one another at ever diminishing intervals, until the darkness seems to burn out, and white, unearthly day shimmers ghost-like on everything under the ceaseless, deafening roar. In the tearing blast, the grand old oak swings and sways below us, and seems to tremble to the core of its great steady heart with a deep exultant joy. Through the long centuries of its green life it has weathered many a night such as this unscathed, rearing its proud crest fearlessly, while the blue glittering peril of the lightning darted in mad frolic around it. And some of its steady, stalwart calm seems to thrill us now as we cling to its rugged bark, skin-sodden and almost blinded, buffeted and beaten on all sides by wind-lashed boughs of green, yet full of a wild, free joy that no words may fetter or confine. Centuries long the old oak has stood a target for unnumbered storms, and yet no harm has come to it in its woodland solitude. And need we blanch before the crooked sickle of the lightning to-night, though it seems to play around us every moment more cruelly, murderously near? Ajax of old brought defiance to vex the spirit of the storm, yet no defiant mood impels us now. Only a deep, all-mastering love of the night and day has drawn us irresistibly to our green watchtower, that we may be nearer to the mighty heart of the universe, pouring out its deep wrath above. And that we may give for once untrammelled vent to the old pagan spirit ever smouldering within us, that bids us worship the sky above, and the earth beneath, and the water under the earth. And the unchanging calm of the old oak wells up to us like warm life-blood through its gnarled and rugged stem. And we feel ourselves part of it, and to have our part suffer and endure in its long struggle through the wild, tempestuous night. That concludes Chapter 2, and is the end of Section 1. Section 2 of Sidelights of Nature in Quill and Crayon by Tickner Edwardes. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapters 3 and 4. Chapter 3 By the Wayside, Part 1, Spring. When the south wind, in May days, with a net of shining haze, silvers the horizon wall, and, with softness touching all, tints the human countenance with a colour of romance, and, infusing subtle heats, turns the sod to violets. By Ralph Waldo Emerson. Sweet Cicely bloom, spreading the steep green bank with a dapple of white, primroses below, so thickly strewn that a nosegay might be gathered at one clutch of idle fingers. Dandelions, scores of thousands of them, rich and golden, wading down through the green grass, or plunging their yellow heads deep in the dust of the footway. Glowing colour everywhere, bluebell azure and daisy white, and pink herb robert filling every cranny between. High above, in the towering thorn hedge, the maybuds gleaming in their emerald paradise. Behind, the deep oak wood, where a nightingale has been sojourning all the bright May morning through, ever and again trying over a phrase of her melody as she ponders new music for the distant night. An age ago, it seems, since first we left the dust and heat of the white highway, and laid down willingly enough on the soft green wayside bank. The waving fronds of Sicily parted their snowy discs of blossom to receive us, then drooped together overhead, making a cool white pattern on the blue of the sky, like old Japanese embroidery, and shielding the eyes from the dazzling sunbeams pouring down into the hollow of the Kentish lane. Nothing seemed to take much heed of us when we came. The yellow bees swept humming to and fro between the nodding heads of blossom, just as they had done since the first sunlight broke through the silver trellis of the dawn. The nightingale sang on as sweetly and as waywardly as ever in the brown oak wood behind. Bumblebees sailed by, heavy with their droning music, and once 2 of them met in mid-air heedlessly above us, striking a deep rich chord together, then sweeping away over the buttercups of the meadow beyond the lane. Presently a robin came out onto a foremost twig of the hawthorn hedge. We could have touched him with outstretched fingers as he perched, singing a bar or two of his old melody, with ever the same sad droop at the end of it. Very stagey and out of place he looked, his red, faded winter mantle contrasting oddly enough with the fresh bright colours around him. For a while he tarried in the May blossom, sometimes silent, sometimes uttering his clear refrain with its delicate phrasing and bursts of bright rippling music between. But he always finished with the old sad modulation, drooping down note by note into grim silence again. Presently he quenched his luting suddenly and vanished into the green shade of the hawthorn, going as he came for his own behoof, and caring not a jot for our presence in his flower-decked concert room. Then a blackbird lifted his gleaming yellow bill out of the stitchwort blossom, eyeing us sideways for a moment, fearlessly but warily. Soon he dipped out of view again, but we could trace his progress behind us as he rustled through the dead leaves beneath the hedgerow, uttering a few faint languid notes as he went. After a while he flirted up into the red oak bough overhead, and then his morning music began. At first he gave us only a mellow note or two, struck at random, high or low in his tenor scale, like a great player tuning his instrument and sounding it carefully before he plunges into the melody for which the silent crowd is waiting around him. But the black singer was in no hurry, and the moments went by one as he sat invisible and silent in his red retreat, while the life of the golden Maytide drifted gently on beneath him. At last he began in earnest, and then all other voices seemed to die away under the spell of his matchless music. Up and down, fast and slow, his rich, harmonious melody ran, full of the restraint that marks the finished artist, full of the clear strength of well-attuned simplicity, full of rapt silences that make so effective a background for the vivid brightness of the succeeding song. Sharp contrast, too, he brought into his music. Harsh, jingling notes uttered quickly and abruptly in the midst of his softest melody, like the sudden clash and blare of cymbals and trombone, when, in the third act of the opera, the pursuing villain enters to the fleeing heroine as she soliloquizes melodiously in the dreary fastnesses of the footlights. But the blackbird seldom stays long in the same place. Soon his bright cascade of music slackened, then ceased, and he was gone. And presently we heard his noisy, shrill alarm note ringing far away in the blue-belled depths of the wood as he flew. Looking out from our green nook down the bright vista of the sunny Kentish lane, the great springtide of blossom seems everywhere at full flood. Even of the earlier flowers that grow almost on the skirt of winter, nothing, save the coltsfoot, has as yet passed wholly away. This has lost its golden-crested pillars for the season, but still shows vigorous green growth and a forest of milk-white seed balls nodding in the quiet morning air. A few anemones linger still in the green precincts of the wood unchanged, except that age has deepened their rosy hue. Even of the celandine a tuft or two yet gleams in the hedge shadows, and the violets seem nearly as plentiful and as gorgeous as ever. As far as the eye can follow it, the sunny lane winds like a silver thread through its deep cleft of blossom. Myriads of glowing light flecks, mounting high into the green hedge, or crowding down in wanton waste of bright colour to the white, hard surface of the solitary road. Opposite our green resting place, a high brick wall shuts in the pleasure ground of a great mansion, and over it hang gaudy garden shrubs, nodding their hectic boughs at the free wild blossom of the lane. Through the gilt trellis of the great iron gates we can see the garden prison, with the flower captives bound ignominiously to stakes, or set in harsh geometric forms, or ranged in rows of meaningless discordant colour. Man makes his own flowers. The blossoms of the meadow and the wayside are not for him. More vivid colour, greater size, complexity of form, these are human needs that may be sought, and sought in vain, among the fields and hedgerows. The swooning scent of the bluebells, drifting out of the misty hazel deep at sundown, has lost its charm for human sense. The bells are too small in size and too few in number. The drooping green stem must be thickened and made straight. The perfume must be intensified into a pungent aroma that sickens. Even the honest brown earth must be dispensed with sometimes, and the poor artificial thing starved in a blue glass prison into a frenzy of garish colour-giving. The sweet wild rose is not sweet enough, and its wildness is its chiefest condemnation. It must be clipped and fed and scarified until strange tints assail it, until its petals are multiplied into a meaningless maze, until its scent will carry as far as a breech-loading gun. The modern garden has no more meaning or inspiration in it than a child's kaleidoscope. Man has made his own flowers. To grow has become a transitive verb, and the gardener has warned off vulgar Mother Nature long ago at the point of his fertilising camel-hair pencil, and with his broadside of dingy dog Latin. The wild wayside garland is for the bee alone. The bee and the blossom twin created the one for the other. Bright and still in the morning light winds the glistening lane between its banks of thronging purple and gold. Yet, sweet though the flowery Kentish laneside seems to us, to the eye of the insect the Maytide coronal of blossom presents another and a widely different view. A strong glass will bring us, in some measure, up to the level of the hoverfly, and open out, albeit dimly and imperfectly, the world of loveliness in which he winnows out his unconsidered day. The dandelion becomes a dense jungle of amber, peopled with a busy crowd that comes and goes unceasingly in and out of the yellow gloom. When a bee comes blundering into it, all its black denizens scramble for shelter to its deeper depths, until the intruder has covered himself with golden pollen and swept singing away. The tiny, red, dead nettle bloom is to us now a vast translucent canopy in rose and silver, with a hanging chandelier of brilliant orange. The stitchwort blossom appears as a magnificent hall, whose ceiling, floor, and walls are tapestried with folded white satin, centred by a fountain of gold. The Veronica becomes a temple of form and formality in gorgeous cobalt blue, with tiger stripes of deeper blue down in the Holy of Holies. 3 lofty columns, the middle one purple, the other 2 pale mauve, spring from a central plinth of sulphur yellow. The whole sanctuary trembles on a shaft of delicate crimson feathered over with white. When the wrack of the midday storm has driven away, and the last raindrops fallen, the cloud that stands in the dazzling sun, clear-cut against the deep blue of the zenith, is the whitest thing in God's creation. Yet nothing else can vie with the clear white purity of the daisy, new-born in the meadow green. And the glass can reveal to us a deeper beauty still. For, to the wandering bee, the daisy is really a giant chalice silver white, heaped up with glittering yellow crystals, each one of which, in turn, opens out into a deep golden bell, holding a rod tipped with the coveted ambrosia. The glassy woodland pool, where the hind comes to drink and gaze on its own reflected shape, is not nature's only mirror. In the deep corolla of the buttercup, the ladybird finds a golden looking-glass, and her shadowy counterpart looms up below her in the shiny surface of the petals, and keeps pace with her as she goes to hide in the dense thicket that fills her dim retreat. Not for human need are the colours of the rainbow and the sunset painted again in 1,000 different grades in every meadow and wayside, but to the bee and the butterfly, to the unnumbered creatures that fill the long sunny day with the music of their wings, to the myriad creeping things that briefly live and die in the little world of a single bell. To these, and these alone, belongs the great springtide of blossom that floods with glamorous colour and entrancing form every green hill and scented valley in the land. That concludes Chapter 3. The section continues with Chapter 4, By the Wayside, Part 2, Summer. 'Twas that delightful season when the broom, full flowered and visible on every steep, along the copses runs in veins of gold. By William Wordsworth. An hour ago the dull blue mist of summer rain had driven away over the distant hill. Already the grass by the lane side was dry once more to the touch, and the white dust was lifting again gently in little clouds before the breeze. The grasshopper had already begun his cheery music among the bracken when the first gleam of watery sunshine came racing over the meadow. And now the reaping machine was out again in the hay from its temporary shelter under the oak tree, and was tearing its way round the meadow with the old jarring, restless note. Here and there on the steep roadside bank, a glistening raindrop still trembled in the pink cup of a mallow, or lit up the fronds of silverweed with its sparkling white. And in the deep oak wood behind, the pattering of the water yet lingered intermittently as each leaf reservoir discharged its burthen upon the thirsty ground below. But the rain was only the summer rain, a wisp of grey cloud that the wind had caught up from the southern sea and dragged weeping over the azure of the Kentish hills. The hot June sun had licked up the drops almost as swiftly as they fell, and now the dust was blowing in the lane once more, and the blue and brown butterflies were fluttering over the marguerites of the meadow, just as they had done all through the weeks of golden reaping weather that had gone by. And the wind that sang in the swaying elm tops was only the summer wind, warm and joyous and free. Straight from the blue ocean it had come, salt-voiced and laden with the scent of brown seaweed torn from the garden under the deep. But the wild rose had winnowed its perfumed harvest in its path, and from every hedgerow wands of pale honeysuckle had yielded up to it their sweetness. And as it swept over the hill, where the poppies glowed like a vast prairie fire, the slumber flowers had given it of their essence, and lulled its hoarse voice into an ever-softening melody. And the chill touch that thrilled it, when it drove its white flock of breakers up the yellow pasture of the shore, was left behind in the grey oats whispering, and the sobbing of the ryegrass, where it grew with the purple tares clinging in its tangle of green. But its salt birthright of freedom it ever kept on its long journey, and now and again, high above the surging song of the forest, as the green branches lashed to and fro in the breeze, its old sea voice rang out once more joyously, as if the salt foam were flying again before it, and the blue water heaving up, as of old, for its wild caress. In the deep sunny cleft of the lane, the summer light has wrought its miracle well. One short month, and all the bright spring blossoms have vanished. Primrose and Sicily and dandelion alike gone back to the brown earth that gave them being. But the steep banks have yielded up their vernal drapery, only to don a gala robe of deeper, richer fashioning. Roses fill the green briar hedge above, and seem to frame in the blue sky with their unnumbered blossoms. Everywhere the foxglove has kindled its torch of burning crimson. Mallows lift their pink satin out of the brake fern at every step, and the green growth everywhere is deeper and softer and full of rich shadows. Already the purple heath boughs glow in the withered dark of last year's foliage, and the grass vetch rears its carmine blossoms under the meadow sweet, where it borders the hedgerow with a fringe of silver light. In the tree-tops, the deep rich voice of the wind is like the droning of the pedal pipes in a great organ. But the clear melody of the summer morning is upborne from the lane below. Every blossom of cinquefoil has its vagrant singer chanting at its portal. Each rosebell yields its honey dole to a song from the amber bee. From every white bramble bud of crumpled silk comes a different note to swell the summer chorus. The wayside pond, where the yellow lilies grow, sends up into the shimmering heated air 100 clear flutings, blent with the soft lip of the lily leaves flapping in the wind. But the green wayside grass gives the sweetest note of all. Deep down in its cool jungle sounds the grasshopper music, like the crisp, sudden rustling of silver foil. Each note might be the kiss of a sunbeam as it filters through to the dark, moist earth below. For when the broad bar of purple shadow sweeps up the lane, the bright music ceases until it has passed on its way, and then the clear circadian note springs up again joyously with the returning light. The sun-steeped shelter of the lane is the slumber place for the month of gold. Here the thronging life of the summer has reached its uttermost limit of glowing colour and unceasing song. No added blossom or scent or strain of insect music can make its bright maturity more lovely still. Only it is as a brimming tide that trembles on the turning. The charm of progress has gone from the lane side at last. The essence of life that has filled it in, storm or shine, with radiant promise, ever since the first coltsfoot gleamed moist and yellow in the fleeting light of the February day. Week after week the brilliant sunshine had burned in the cloudless heaven, and through the long days hardly a breath of air stirred in the green oak wood, where the linnet sang slenderly and the jays called afar in the hollow deep. In the meadows beyond, the landrail craked his dry, harsh note under the mowing grass. But the summer change was fast dawning over his cool retreat. When May was done, and the morrow would bring with it the full June glory, the meadows had already reached their zenith of living colour. Over all, the rose-pink sorrel plumes hung in the gentle air, and the great white marguerites stood up glistening and motionless, save where the humble-bee drew down the gold-eyed blossom with the weight of his blundering caress. Below them, the grass sheaves bloomed in 1,000 shades of drab and mauve and silver grey, and the lilac sheepspit tempered them here and there with its pale lustre of amethyst. And in the soft green depths below, daisies lingered still, gleaming up dimly like white pebbles in the bed of a woodland brook. Then the June sun came, and the weaver of the seasons brought out her shuttles with the summer threads in them. The green meadow fabric, with its soft pattern of Maytide colourings, changed imperceptibly to shimmering cloth of gold. The great ox-eye daisies grew taller and multiplied 100-fold, and the sorrel burned blood red over the glowing russet of the ripened hay. Then, one morning, the wind came up from the south, hot and boisterous, and set the woods singing again after their long silence. The gold-brown meadows rose and fell under its strong breath like the face of a heaving sea. The sky was filled with snow-white cloud forms that scurried all day long over the blue. Great grey shadows swept unceasingly from hilltop to hilltop, and the whole landscape seemed alive with the changing light. It was perfect mowing weather. The hay harvest was ripe and ready, and from every meadow on the countryside the shrill note of the reaping machine rose ceaselessly all through the long hours of the flickering golden day. Yet, in the June of olden time, when machinery in agriculture was still only a dim possibility of the future, the hay harvesting must have been a blither, merrier season. The harsh jangle of the mowing machine seemed strangely out of place in the meadow, with its circling woods and hedgerows teeming with bird-song. All through the months of spring the grass has grown to music. The first slender blades were drawn by the grey lark's carolling out of the winter clod, and the chaffinches went dipping over it through the brief February sunshine, and watered it with their silver song. Then the thrush piped to it from the swelling hazel branch, though the keen March wind blew his crest up and ruffled his wing coverts as he sang. And by, when it was already in vigorous growth, the rich murmur from the lambing pens began to rise into the still night air, and grew day by day into the sweetest sound that can touch the farmer's ear. Then with April came the swallows, with their bright, ceaseless twittering, and after them the nightingale sat in the blackthorn blossom, and sang over it all the spring night through. In days of old the ripened hay came down, as it had grown, to music, for the clear melodious swish of the scythe mingled with the hedgerow voices imperceptibly, and seemed only as a slumber song following the living music of sunny days gone by. But the reaping machine comes now with its hurrying discordance, and the meadow idyll is shattered rudely in a moment. The thrush stops short in her weft of bright melody. The bee sails away to the upland farm where the green corn sways unmolested over its poppy scarlet. The routed butterflies vanish towards the distant fallow land, with its purple thistles and nodding yellow weed. And only the strong south wind stays in the meadow, sweeping by for the last time with the old rich wavering note that has sounded over it ever since the yellow stars of celandine bleached white, then sank away into the mounting emerald of the spring. That concludes Chapter 4, and is the end of section 2. Section 3 of Sidelights of Nature in Quill and Crayon by Tickner Edwardes. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 5. A Midsummer Night's Dream. The silver moon into that winding dell, with slanted gleam athwart the forest tops, tempered like golden evening, feebly fell. A green and glowing light, like that which drops from folded lilies, in which glowworms dwell. By Shelley. No maze of many colours had brought the long summer day to its close. The morning sun had lifted over the hilltop in a monotone of golden light. In gold the still, pure day had worn through the teeming breathless hours of light and life, and now the gold had ended only in deeper gold, burning until the grey dark came down at length silently from the star-wrought heaven. When the nightingale began to sing in the briar-rose bush, it was already night. The hollow moon, wan golden, drooped at half-mast in the deepening blue of the sky. Still a faint blush lingered on the western earth-line to mark where the day had been. But the night creatures were already stirring in the deep oak wood, and the wheeling bats flickered darkly to and fro under the growing starlight. Along the hedgerow, where the pale hemlock clustered, dim white moths began to hover uncertainly, and here and there a glowworm had already kindled her pale fire below, filling the brake fern with a misty halo of green. Across the narrow lane, rabbits scurried from cover to cover, their white tufts gleaming in the pallid moonshine as they leaped. With the fall of the night, the faint summer wind got up out of the west, stirring gently in the dark tree-tops overhead. Then the nightingale mounted her watchtower among the roses, and began to fill the blue summer night with her silver pealing. It was as if the whole wood had waited for her signal. Scarcely had the first clear notes of her summer song died away on the tense night air, when an answering note rang out from the depths of the hazel thicket. Then another and another, until far and near the darkness seemed aglow with the new-born melody. In the distant oatfield the corncrake began his dry, harsh calling, and the fern owls took up the burden of the night song with their churring tremolo, which seems to have in it all the essence of the summer tide blent into one deep, joyous outpouring. The drone of the beetles, as they sailed by invisibly, gained a deeper volume with every moment. In the hollow spaces of the wood, the owls swept by with their clear, low hooting, and now and again a harsher cry rang out of the pine darkness where the jays had made their sanctuary. But in field or forest there was no rival to the clear bright singer in the rosebush. Every other note welling up into the grey darkness seemed united into one harmonious undertone for her singing. Even the voice of the mild wind in the elm tops was subdued to her music, as it shone out like a star of song, dimming the host of stars that filled the night. Halting and veering, the slow night wind crept into the heart of the wood, and with it came the scent of the roses, of the honeysuckle from the distant hedgerow, and the smell of white clover from the meadowland between. The moon rose higher and higher into the steep sky, and with every moment shed a stronger, clearer light down through the dark mosaic of the dancing leaves. Where the pathway broadened ahead into a wide grassy glade, the untrammelled moonlight flooded the open space, which shone like a clear lake through the sombre lacework of the intervening trees. Here, in the full glory of the summer day, had been a maze of deep glowing colour. Every bright-hued blossom of the season had vied to make the solitary place more gorgeous in its rich emblazory of gold and purple. The ground was broken and furrowed where excavations had been made in some bygone time, but the human traces had been long ago hidden away under the green turf and the crackling gorse bushes. In the centre rose a small plateau of level grass, marking where the forester's hut had stood. The line of the walls could still be followed, and here and there a few moss-grown boulders remained half hidden under the green bracken. To this sunny clearing, lost in the woodland labyrinth, came every winged thing of the summer. The bees filled it with their laborious music all day long. Blackcaps sang in the ash cover with every return of day. The grey sedge warblers clung sideways to the nodding thistle wands that lifted their purple tassels 6 feet or more up into the yellow sunshine. And where, just by the margin of the wood, the ground dipped down into a silent, weed-grown pool, great dragonflies veered in and out of the bulrushes and lit up the shady deep with the green glitter of their coats of mail. Often in the sultry noontide, when the glowing heat of the day had silenced the birds for a while, and the grasshopper sang all the louder among the blue harebells, we had rested for a little in this long-forgotten nook. There it was pleasant to lie under the shadow of the great oak tree, and to watch the butterflies playing to and fro in the chervil, and the bees pulling down the great white boughs of bindweed that clung in the hawthorn bush. The thronging life and never-ceasing movement of the place fascinated us, and the moments would grow to minutes and then to hours, and still we lingered spellbound, dreaming, while the broad band of shadow crept out of the wood and over the sunny plain before us, every moment drawing one more bright blossom into its azure gloom. Did ever silence and stillness, we wondered, come to this teeming centre of growth and life? Was there an interval in the dark of the night when the bright radiation of the day, that was gone, just failed to touch the first faint ripple of life, reaching out far ahead of the golden dawning to come? Was the bright glowing colour still in the blossom under the cold silver plating of the moonshine? Or did it vanish before the night shadows, like the crimson gleam of sundown that burns on a westward wall? But we had ever left our enchanted island when the last light of the evening still shone like amber in the tree-tops. And then the ringing bird voices had begun again, and there always seemed more vigorous life and music around us than ever there had been before. But now, at last, we stood at midnight under the canopy of the oak tree. For the first time, the woodland clearing lay before us, steeped in the fair white moonbeams of the summer night, and all wandering speculation was at rest. It was like an exquisite theme in silver point. All the deep riotous colour had vanished with the last kiss of the dying day. The sumptuous bridal wreath of the wood had withered and gone, and in its place lay a pale garland of mourning, more delicately fair in its snow-white purity, but cold and silent and still. Yet the night had made one great atonement to the day, for every leaf and petal was outlined in trembling dewdrops, each holding a bright sparkle of moonlight in its crystal sphere. And then we came to know that all the vivid colours of the day were not really gone, but only hidden under the silver sheen. For the yellow spurt of a match, held low to the ground, brought back in a moment the living green to the grass, and the blue to the veronica, and the soft rose purple to the drooping foxglove bells. Even as we gazed over the dim white silence, the moon had reached the brink of the towering woodland thicket, and the broad shadow began to creep out of the undergrowth once more. Already the bramble fringe on the edge of the clearing was merged in deep darkness. Here and there a ghost moth fluttered on the boundary of the light, its pallid hue appearing and vanishing in turns as it circled in and out of the shade. Then a dry stick snapped sharply in the misty deep of the wood, and presently we could make out a slinking form creeping through the moonlit tangle of the clearing. It was Reynard on his nightly beat, and as he reached the open space where the forester's hut had been, he rose into full view, darkly silhouetted against the frost-like glimmer beyond. Then he seemed to scent an unwonted presence in his domain, for he halted a moment, with ears pricked up, and his hungry yellow eyes glinting luminously towards us. In another instant, with a flourish of his bushy tail, he had vanished through the dense thicket as silently as he had come. Slowly the dark rim of the night crept back over the sylvan courtyard of the wood, and the pent silence that had brooded over it, under the magic spell of the moonshine, seemed to dissolve gradually in the wake of the retiring light. Ever and again the deep rich note of a stag beetle sounded out of the advancing gloom. The crickets began a bright chirping chorus in the jungle of the bracken. A stray wisp of the hot night wind had found a pathway through the wood, and roamed round the clearing with a hollow sound, setting the white thistleheads rocking, and the loops of woodbine swinging briskly in the alder boughs. Then the black shadow tide washed out the last pale flickering moonbeam, and our sylvan hermitage lay at length deep in the murmuring darkness that would shelter it until the morrow's sun could return, and take it again in all its dew-bright loveliness into the burning radiance of another day. That concludes Chapter 5. The section continues with Chapter 6. The Open Sea. Lightly the long snake leaps after tempests, gaily the sun gleam glows after rain. In labour and daring lies luck for all mortals, foul winds and foul witchwives, frae women alone. From an old Norwegian sea song. Afar on the northern skyline, the cliffs of Kent, white in the morning sun. Southward, the misty French lowlands just discernible in the grey distance, with the shadowy peak of Greenay looming up dimly in their midst. So much is visible to us for a moment as the lugger rises on the crest of the wave, with the glistening iridescent foam driving over her like snowflakes in the yellow sunshine. In a moment more we are down again in the trough of the sea, the green translucent water towering up darkly on either bow, and the gulls screaming away down the vista of the water valley beyond. Then up once more into the teeth of the southwest gale, every salt-soaked chord of the rigging striking a different note in the shrill blast. Every plank and timber of the old craft groaning, each red-tanned sail straining and tugging at its fastenings as if it were mad to break away and follow the grey storm birds up into the cloud-swept blue of the summer sky. Day after day the old ocean had lain slumbering under the calm summer light. From the cliff summit, as far as the eye could reach, the waters stretched blue and motionless, until sea and sky were knit together in the shadowy grey of the horizon. The rough old fishing boats, with their brown, patched sails drooping idly in the still air, lay about at anchor on the shimmering surface, waiting drowsily for the halcyon calm to break. Everywhere the gulls were asleep on the water, looking like a flock of white feathers drifting. On the steep beach the light foamless ripples broke faintly with the lifting tide, making the only sound that stole up through the throbbing, breathless heat of the July day. Day after day the sun burned fiercely down from the cloudless sky, and day by day the heavy mists on the horizon gathered slowly and sluggishly until they hung like a dense pall of reddened smoke looming far up into the torrid heaven. Then, at last, came the long-awaited change. The sun had gone down in a tumult of purple, its angry rays streaming up fanwise through the advancing cloud rack like the eruption of a great volcano. And with the swift vaporous dark came a gusty, eddying wind that in an hour had gathered up a thick black coverlet over the starshine, filling the air with a sweep of hot raindrops and moaning through the cordage of the shipping with a hollow, surging sound. A wild night was coming, and soon the beach was alive with the chant of the fishermen, as the great windlasses went groaning and creaking round, and the huge black hulks of the fishing smacks crept slowly up the shingle out of the treacherous, complaining sea. And all through the dark, resounding night, the southwest gale drove the towering white breakers onto the coast with a roar like the deep booming of heavy artillery. And round the lifeboat house, where the overhanging eaves of the roof afforded shelter from the fierce lashing rain, a little crowd of tarpaulined men huddled all night long, keeping anxious watch out into the clamorous darkness. But the thin pale line of rocket fire, with the blue flash at the end of it, never came to hail them out to the terrible good winds, and the morning broke at last, chilly and grey, casting a pallid sidelong glance over the tumbling waste of waters. Then, with the full light of day, when the wind had abated a little, and a bright gleam of sunshine was struggling here and there through the dense cloud pack, the lugger was made ready for her cruise, waiting on the slip until the seventh wave brought with it the accustomed lull in the watery onslaught. In a moment more, with a sweep and a plunge headlong through the beating, blinding surf, she is out at last safely in deep water, breaking the green, weed-strewn billows into angry foam as she speeds. In a moment The roar of the breakers on the beach is drowned in the deeper tumult of the open sea. Then a steep plane of glistening water tilts suddenly up ahead of us, with a network of white froth patterning the green. The straining boat climbs up it giddily. Far above us, the crest of the wave seems to touch the sky as it curls over with a hissing, roaring noise, and sweeps down over the checkered emerald water in a seething avalanche of foam. As it strikes the lugger, hiding her in a cloud of spray, she stops shudderingly, heeling over until the bell of her mainsail drags into the surf. Then, after one blinding, breathless moment, we are out again in the tearing wind and sun, racing down the other side of the frothy precipice, deep into the shadowy foam-lit stronghold of the sea. With the approach of noon, the last black flying streamer has scurried across the blue. The storm has gone on its landward journey, and far away on the horizon the dense drift of the tumultuous night lies packed and tumbled and full of a fierce dull fire. In the track of the lulling gale, the ponderous rain clouds are thronging up in deep grey masses like the heavy low-hanging smoke from great guns at sea, crested and bordered with the morning light, and cut here and there with a glistening line of vapour drawn out fine by the breeze. From the great wide heaven above the storm has vanished, yet down in the deep heart of the sea its full riotous life and movement seem to remain in all their pristine vigour. Down to its deepest depths the old ocean has been stirred by the lash of the gale, and the sun-barred waters swing and swirl under the changing light, as if the peace of bygone days were never to return to them. The billow tops break into flying foam with all the old angry vehemence. The tumbling cataract of water hurtles down the green swaying steep, hissing and roaring as if the weird glitter of the lightning still clove its zigzag course through the darkness above it, where now the quick sunbeams of the cloud-flocked day chase the long shadows over the noontide sea. Far away over the distant skyline, the rain is already falling in a grey, ragged fringe against the deep sulphurous blue of the lifting cloud wall. Beneath, the wave-tops gleam up weirdly white, where the sunbeams dart in slantingly and entangle the foam as it flies. Half the seascape is already dark under the advancing rain, and the brilliant snow-wreathed emerald of the sunny water fades away in great zones as the deep murk of the torrent trends onward. From crest to crest the driving shadows leap towards us. By turns the silver and the green are swamped in the quick grey patter of the oncoming rain. As each drop strikes the tumbling surface of the sea, it seems to rebound darkly, and then to melt away into a pallid mist scum that hovers dimly over the water everywhere. At last the rain gloom drags over the plunging, straining lugger, and blots out the sunlight from her ruddy canvas with one sweeping, sidelong touch. The shrill lash of the falling water drowns the strong sea voices for a brief interval. Then the torrent ebbs and ceases. The sweet salt odour of the sea lifts again from below. The grey rain cloud shreds away lingeringly on the strong bosom of the wind. The rough, rollicking voice of the old ocean peals out again sonorously on every side. A swirl of coppery light glimmers high up in the leeward gloom, with the grey mist driving over it in gauzy curtains. Then the shadowy drapery is torn away by the careering wind, and once more the naked blue heaven stands out stripped and beautiful. The summer day is wearing to a close as we head our boat at last for the Kentish shore. From the face of sky and sea the shrill turbulence of the storm has vanished. The south-west wind still blows strongly, and the green water lifts as high and subsides as deeply as ever. But the foam no longer drives before the breeze, and the deep, steady swell of the water leaps into frothy fury only where the prow of the lugger cleaves it under the stress of the ever-dropping wind. Where the steep beach rears its barrier against the steady swing of the sea, the deep, angry voice of the tempest lingers yet. A mile away from the shore we can hear the breakers thundering on the shingle, and see the white surf leaping up far into the mellow sunlight. There is a danger still ahead for the rough old boat ere she will lie again in her snug berth, high and dry on the launching slip. Presently, as we near the foreshore, the warning word is given. The lugger is brought swiftly to. The great brown sails come rustling and clattering down, and minute after minute we wait under bare cordage for a lull in the shoreward strife. At last it comes. A great shining roller has broken and swept up the steep beach higher than any of its forerunners. As it swings back again in a boiling, clattering avalanche, it meets another oncoming wave as mighty as itself. There is a deep reverberating roar as the great forces meet and dash the salt life out of each other. Then comes the expected interval of calm, and the skipper's voice rings out again sharp and clear. Up soars the fluttering canvas of the lugger, creaking and straining under the force of strong hands. In a moment the wind leaps into the great sails. In another moment the old boat is hurled like a javelin over the grey swirl of intervening water, safe and sound onto the grinding, groaning beach. That concludes Chapter 6, and is the end of Section 3. Section 4 of Sidelights of Nature in Quill and Crayon by Tickner Edwardes. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapters 7, 8 and 9. Chapter 7. A River Idyll. The traveller's joy still journeyed in the hedge, nor yet to palsied gossamer had shrunk. Green still the bracken round the beech tree's trunk, but loose strife seeded by the river edge, and now and then a sigh came rippling through the sedge. By Alfred Austin. The way of the river is towards the west, where the broad marsh country spreads its green threshold in the keen salt breath of the sea. And over the marshes, with every close of day, the dying evening light streams up in a shining barrier of gold, as if to stem the fresh bright water on its pathway to its ocean home. But the mighty river sweeps on as placidly and as forcefully as ever. And when the last red radiance of the summer evening has vanished from the face of the waters, and the great planets are blazing out in silver light above, there is ever the same strong serenity in the hiss of the tide through the rushes, and the murmur of the current where the willow wands trail their green feathers in the swirling stream below. In the faraway inland country, where the dawn creeps rosy red out of its dark night cradle, the great river has its own dawning. Up through the glistening pebbles in a woodland deep it springs, cresting and bubbling into the green leaf-winnowed light. Then away between its low moss-girt banks, a mere thread of wreathing, purling water, filling the dark undergrowth with tinkling bell music as it goes. And as it presses on through the deep wood wilderness, where the ash keys hang in golden clusters, telling of the waning summer days, another voice, as bright and rippling as its own, sounds faintly from the distant upland heather. It is the mountain brook, new born in the morning mists above, and presently it comes leaping and frothing down the narrow rocky path, showering with clear diamond dew the harebells that cluster on its brink. Ruddy red is its tortuous way, for the mountain water brings down with it iron dust torn from the deep heart of its rock-bound home. But the highland brook has cast nearly all its ruddy burthen on the way, and when at last it falls plashing into the deep coombe where the yellow camomilla grows, and the woodland stream leaps crystal bright to meet it, only the faintest rosy flush gleams for an instant in the commingled waters, to tell of the strain of gypsy blood in the old ancestral rock. And from every copse and shadow-clad hillside on the river's way through the west country, some new voice rings out into the morning light, and some new streamlet comes tumbling down through the alder thicket or tangle of briar to swell its ever-growing volume. And as the waters sweep on together, murmuring under the green vaulted silence of the wood, or through sun-steeped meadows spangled with gold and silver, the first deep note of the river song, the united harmony of many voices, breaks out sweet and clear above the sighing of the wind in the tree-tops, and the soft bee melodies that rise from the poppy-fretted wasteland under the hill. In the shallows above the weir there are bulrushes and mauve-grey reeds that whisper together as they bend before the breeze. There the river broadens out into a sunny water garden, where the wind flecks up the lily leaves shining and green, and curls them over and over, beating out a rippling, running tune on the water's face. In the shadow of the Eights, the river seems to pause and ponder, lying in clear brown pools, where the beetles dart to and fro and weave a silver network of ripples over the dark, limpid deep. Martins fill the sunshine everywhere with the bright flash of their plumage and the restless twitter of their song. In the lee of the willow wood, forming a deep bay sheltered from the breeze, the river and the sunlight have drifted in together and lie slumbering in a lake of molten gold. There the swans love to idle away the summer hours, rustling their yellow bills deep into their wing feathers, or sailing slowly by in dusky silhouette against the shining plain of the water beyond. And as they drift over the still surface, the course of their journeying lies behind them in a double gleaming line, dividing away into 1,000 dark ripples over the bright sun-paving of the sheltered bay. Green rushes throng down to the water's edge on every side, and all through the summer's day a never-ending murmur arises out of them, as the golden pulse of the river beats gently against their broad glistening spears. And when, at eventide, the last shimmering sun-spangle has drifted out of the bay, and the evening light rests on the broad shallows beyond in a crimson veil of glory, the ardent river still showers its kisses fast and faint on the rush-robed bosom of the shore. Every changing mood of the water has its echo here in the quiet wood sanctuary. When the still summer tide droops on the river in golden silence, and the green forest slumbers motionless in the torrid light, when the blue vault of the heaven seems to have expanded away into the uttermost reach of space, and the faint white clouds are dappled over it in a soft pattern, like exquisitely delicate wedgwood, then the kiss of the river in the rushes is lulled away into the faintest adumbration of sound. But every light wandering zephyr that may ruffle for a moment the calm out on the shallows has its quick answering ripple from the sleeping waters under the willow wood. And when the silver dayspring breaks the wide silence of the starry night with a sudden moaning, and the gusty storm wind sweeps up in cloud-cumbered turbulence over the mist-locked azure of the eastern hills, then the river awakens suddenly into grey fury under the lash of the breeze. The angry wavelets drive into the sheltered bay in a hustling, foam-flecked crew. The faint vision of the blue night sky that lingered yet on its glassy floor is rudely broken and dispersed. The harsh wind springs into the willow branches, bending them down with a shrill-voiced, crackling violence, and the rich murmur of the river's night caress dies away in the new-born agitation as the surge of the tyrant waters beats relentlessly into the wind-torn wilderness of its rushy brink. In the heart of the westward country, where the river runs wide and deep through pleasant pastures and hillsides purple with blossoming heather, an ancient town extends its roofs of old red tile and grizzled thatch ramblingly on either bank. An old stone bridge stands in the centre of the town, spanning the water with its many crumbling arches. And here the river loves to tarry a while, musing over the years that are past and gone. Over every grey boulder of the ancient bridge the red valerian clambers, and down where the water laps the channelled stones are green with the waving growth of centuries. Wallflowers cling in the crevices here and there, with a yellow gleam of blossom still abiding on the twisted stems. Under the coping stones the martins have built their nests for ages, coming back year after year and forming the clay shell dwellings always in the same spot among the stone crop and the lichens. On the old bridge, in rain or sunshine, there is always the tramp of busy human feet, and some bright sprinkle of life going forward. On market days, the lowing of the cattle begins at break of morn, and the sweet incense of their breath descends to the river through the dim half-light, and mingles with the faint night odours brought down from woodbine thicket and meadow spun over with a lilac fleece of mint blossom. In their season, all the fragrant garnerings of the earth look down on the river from the ancient viaduct. In the callow days of summer, the first lumbering wain goes by over the cobbles, groaning under its weight of red trifolium. Then, in a quivering mountain of green, the new-mown ryegrass looms by, cut with the morning dew still clinging to it in a shower of diamond dust. In a little while the hay comes up from the meadows with the summer sunlight still hovering in its grey-green depths, and by, in the shortening August days, the old bridge trembles with the weight of the corn harvest, as the ponderous wagons creep by complainingly under their rustling amber loads. In olden days, when there was still life on the great high road, and before the long white meteor of steam began to show in the distant valley, the bright clarion of the post horn would ring out sharply in the morning sun, and presently the coach would sweep by over the bridge in a dash and flash of scarlet and silver, to a merry tune of champing bit and jingling harness, then disappear into the narrow winding streets, leaving a dim echo of its cheery fanfaronade still vibrating on the face of the water below. But this is only one of a host of memories with the great river now, as it washes by through the resounding arches of the bridge on its long journey towards its sunset home. That concludes Chapter 7. The section continues with Chapter 8. Nature's Pessimist. A pleasing land of drowsy head it was, of dreams that wave before the half-shut eye, and of gay castles in the clouds that pass, for ever flushing round a summer sky. By James Thomson. Here at the bend of the shady lane, just before it rises through the deep cutting on the summit of the hill, not a breath of air is stirring, and the whole country round lies hot and still under the September sun. But high overhead, where the tops of the great elms seem to join the blue, the soft morning air is rustling faintly among the branches, and sending down to the hot, simmering earth a murmur of cool breezes like the far-away singing of the water brooks. From the green bank in the shade of the hawthorn hedge, we can see the narrow Kentish lane winding down through its steep banks, barred and barriered with golden light, until it loses itself in the dense copse of the grey-green ash and willow, which fills the hollow under the hill. The deep straight cutting through the hilltop above is only of recent date, some 20 years back, and the ancient track of the roadway is still faintly visible, plateaued on the high bank overhead, where it passes among the trees, almost hidden under a green winding sheet of hawthorn and bramble. Above in the thorn bush, already flushed with scarlet from the fast ripening berries, a robin sits pouring out his liquid song like an evening lullaby, and opposite a small brown wren is creeping among the beechen hedge, with her busy, creaking note softened and subdued by the drowsy influences around her. All the earth is slumbering and at rest in the misty amber light, and every living and growing thing seems steeped in the universal calm of the morning. The young oaks in the lane below are full of the bubbling, overflowing notes of the chaffinch, but the song rises to us bereft of its wonted precipitancy, and the swallows in the air, uttering their quaint rhythmic chorus as they fly, appear to have but an idle purpose in their incessant wheeling and dipping down through the leaf shadows checkering the dusk of the solitary lane. Even the noisy clown of nature, the blackbird, is subdued and silenced by the peace of the golden morning, though he delves and scrabbles as busily as ever among the dry leaves under the beech stoles. The air is full of the deep droning music of insect wings, rising and falling in volume, like the lilt and flow of a summer sea. The high, fine note of the playing midgets blending with the deeper tone of the rose beetle as it sails like a dusky opal through the sun-bathed air. Everywhere on the sloping bank, great lazy white butterflies are hovering over the spreading discs of yellowweed, or playing to and fro among the purple mallows and snowy archangel bloom. Little copper butterflies sit fanning their wings idly on the swaying campions, or hang motionless from the lilac sheepspit blossom, drooping down on its slender stem over the green feather grass. Even the bees, humming by through the still air, have caught the drowsy humour of the day, and one of them stops to dally for a moment where a stray sunbeam, glancing into our cool grotto of shade, has caught the tip of the hanging bramble spray in a golden noose of light. This is the season of the robin's homecoming. All the summer long he has hidden away in the quiet woodlands, and we have not missed him, for there has been music enough and to spare. But now the blackcap is gone from the spinney, and the grey lark has finished his summer carolling, so the red-breast hermit may not tarry longer in his cool retreat. But his is no merry music heralding the golden days in store, for his song is always a retrospect, and a sad one at best. In the springtime he sat in the hedgerow, taking no joy in the myriad growing things around him, and seeing no bright promise of glad life in the coltsfoot gleaming among the fresh grass of the meadow, or the yellow celandine bordering the pathway through the wood. His song was full of sad parting from the dim, uncertain light of the short winter's day, the white miracle of the snow, the fairy fabric of the hoarfrost garlanding the hedgerow in fantastic drapery. And he sang a sad good-bye, even to the wan voice of the winter blast, which he deemed would lose its tunefulness when the delicate tracery of dark branches lay at last hidden under the green. So, even then, the robin hermit took no heart of grace, though in every bush and brake the molten buds were greening, sun-started into sappy life. But now he has to tell of shortening days and the ebbing of the strong sap tide under the chill of the long autumn night, and his melancholy song has in it a gloomier cadence than ever. And so we leave our pessimist in the quiet lane, singing his durnful requiem over the summer days that are past and gone. That concludes Chapter 8. The section continues with Chapter 9. Voices of the Night. The skies they were ashen and sober, the leaves they were crisped and sere, the leaves they were withering and sere. It was night in the lonesome October. By Edgar Allan Poe. Here in the green heart of Kent, the quiet autumn night lies like a dim grey coverlet on hill and coombe. Over the hill brow the pale moon sickle hangs golden and misty, and the creeping vapours of the night encircle her in long, outreaching filaments, bearing her burden of iridescent halo among them. All the countryside is slumbering under the grey darkness, but from far and near there rises into the still night air a steady murmur of unrest. For a little while, before they hung out the first yellow flag over the high elm battlements, there had been no warning voice in day or dark of the great change that was so soon to fall. Summer was done. The traveller's joy was putting out its grey feathers. The red roseberries filled the briar hedge with flame. But in oak and elm and beech there was, as yet, no sign that the Earth Mother would soon be garnering her woodland harvest of gold. Yet, though we did not heed it, the rooks had already given us plain warning. The sun and the northern gale had gone down together in a troubled sea of crimson. The sky loomed up behind the black-plumaged army as it streamed across the dying light towards the far-off rookery, filling the air with its hoarse complaining. And then, instead of dwindling out far into the star-silence, the tumult of voices had, in a moment, grown still. Then it came to pass in a single night. The great tide of the sap failed and ebbed. A new voice came up from the wood and copse and shady lane, and at once every roosting thing was astir in its slumber. The pewit's note rose in one melody over the madded fields. Merle and mavis were awakened, and piped in low, half-timorous strain. Even the little fern owls, circling under the dark oak canopy, knew that the old order had changed, and their jarring note took in it something of the same unrestful cadence. Slowly the autumn voices crept dirge-like into the song of the night, every green branch shrinking under the failing sap, the decay and disintegration of the foliage, above all the constant dropping of the myriad leaves, which from now on will never cease until the last golden oak banner has shredded and fallen away. All these faint sounds, mingling and crescending into one busy murmur, fill the air of the faint autumn night, and lend to it wholly its strangely sad exhilaration. In the great city the night has its voices too, even though they be mere human echoes of the day, dead and meaningless. The broad dark river, threading its way blindly through obstructing bridge and maze of silent shipping, seems to form a vast sounding board, in which the long day's thunderous traffic still finds dim, uncertain utterance. The steady tramp of unnumbered busy feet, the ring and thud of countless hoofs, the crash and clang of crane and hoisting gear, the shrill screaming from the little steam tugs, and the deep, hollow note from the larger craft, the long roar of the coast express as it clatters over the vibrating bridge, the whole resounding gamut of a busy London day seems to rise again in faint echoes from the river deep, filling the sombre night with a drowsy harmony. But in the plash and swirl of the hurrying water there is yet another and a grander voice, for the great river has a song of its own to sing. It tells of green banks lying far back in the quiet night, and the scent of wild mint drifting out in slow vapour over its broad bosom. It tells of the great white cattle knee-deep in the mist of the water meadows, and the eternal whispering of the reeds as they bend down before the sluggish wind. And as it washes by the old black piles and granite wharves in the gloom of the autumn night, we seem to hear the echo of many bird voices caught in the faint rhythm of its flowing, the clear, low hoot of the owl wheeling through the elm covert, the last sleepy notes from the rookery, the wail of a heron among the sallows by the weir, the cry of a belated plover, grief-stricken and importunate. But as the first grey gleamings of dawn silver the spires of the eastward city, the strong barrier of the tide comes surging up, and the murmur of the still darkened river sounds at once tremulous and filled with a vague alarm. The waters become divided against themselves, and wash to and fro in bubbling agitation, or cleave into diagonal sheets that dip and curl under one another in a riot of conflicting voices. And thus the tide and the river battle together hoarsely until far into broad day, when the great river conquers its briny enemy once more, as it always does, and drives it back again into its roaring solitude. That concludes Chapter 9, and is the end of Section 4. Section 5 of Sidelights of Nature in Quill and Crayon by Tickner Edwardes. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapters 10, 11 and 12. Chapter 10. November Gold. Yet 'twas a pleasant toil to trace and beat among the glowing trees this winding way, while the sweet autumn sunshine, doubly sweet, flushed with the ruddy foliage, round us lay, as if some gorgeous cloud of morning stood in glory mid the arches of the wood. By William Cullen Bryant. Out in the lane beyond the elm grove, the old stone wall lies bathed in the bright November sun, and every chink and crevice in the ancient stones harbours some creeping thing long since perished but for its friendly shelter and support. Wedge-shaped buttresses, some old and crumbling into dust, others of more recent date, hold it up on either side, and are in their turn held up and bound together by the great cables of green-veined ivy which cross and recross it in an iron embrace. The finger mark of centuries is there in the scaly spreading lichens, ashy grey and flaming amber, and emerald star moss covers the hoary boulders with a soft, thick winding sheet. In a deep recess between two buttresses, a single spray of pink herb robert lifts its rosy head to the sun, and hard by one golden disk of dandelion, last of its race, still lingers to recall to us the yellow oceans of dandelions in days of summer prime. On the ancient weather-worn coping, green with the grass of years, a solitary robin sits and sings a soft musing song with a quaint sad modulation in it, as if it were a requiem over summer days dead and gone. This November glow does not deceive him as it does the missel thrush pouring forth his song cascade far away in the dead oak spray in the wood. Any warm sun-steeped morning in the year will make the grey-speckled thrush light-hearted, or draw from the lusty blackbird a measure of his summer piping. But the little brown robin sits amid the crimson hawthorn berries, and sees afar off the ice and snow, and his small heart tells him that, for all the flood of golden sunlight, Jack Frost will have his reign, and that the time is still far distant when the pink anemone will bloom under the hazels in the wood, or the gold-starred coltsfoot whiten in the breeze of the young spring day. But yester-even the fierce north-west wind had died away in a tumbled sea of fiery crimson and dense jagged drift of sulphurous blue. For days and days it had torn and shaken the great elm trees until it had stripped from them the last vestige of their autumn foliage, and now, in the calm, sunny November morning, the leaves lie in a deep, moist carpet of shimmering cloth of gold. Nothing but the oaks have been able to stand against the fury of the blast, and these still bear their leaf mantle bravely aloft, and can be seen in the bright sun stretching away in dim yellow undulations until all colour is merged and lost in the far distance of glimmering grey. In the long grass by the lane side, the dew hangs in great clusters of diamonds, which as we move change to rubies and emeralds and sapphires in the misty morning light. On either side lie the meadows, white with the clinging drops glistening like newly fallen snow, and the spider draperies swing trembling in the hedgerow, tier upon tier of fairy gossamer, with warp of frosted silver and weft of sparkling gems. As we step off the hard road onto the thick, soft carpet of the leaves, our tread becomes suddenly noiseless, and the blackbirds, not heeding our approach, linger until we are almost upon them, and then go wheeling away over the meadowland with their noisy, triumphant fanfaronade. Young chaffinches are everywhere in the hedgerow, uttering their short, sharp metallic note, or darting among the old grey elm trunks like flashes of green and silver light. Robins sing in the young chestnuts, where the buds are already bright and sticky, although the old leaves lie scarce yellowed on the sward. And a whole bevy of long-plumaged tits chase one another through the bare birch tendrils, twittering like mice as they go. Away up in the blue air, the rooks are sailing to and fro, carrying sticks for the nest mending. The deep cawing is as incessant now as ever, but it seems to be quieter, and to have in it something of a dignified contentment at a season's labour brought safely and prosperously to an end. Work, indeed, there is still to do in strengthening the great nests in the rookery against onslaught of winter wind and storm. But this is only playtime compared with the season of the brood rearing, when so many hungry beaks have to be increasingly supplied all through the long spring days. So the great placid rook is taking life easily up there in the blue, and in his rich harmonious voice there is a drowsy note of idleness chiming in well with this golden season of the leaf fall and of nature's approaching slumber. Further on in the lane, the winding pathway, with its necklace of golden yarrow and red burr thistle, runs along the summit of a bank, and below this lies the roadway carpeted with beech leaves, amber and russet brown. On the other side of the lane are the hawthorns and briar roses, blushing deep red with their weight of scarlet fruit, and beyond these lie the fresh ploughed glebe-lands, where the spiders have bridged and girded the brown furrows with myriads of gleaming lines of rainbow light. As we move along by the roadside, a soft droning fills the air, and a host of flies, their bodies covered with scales like mother of pearl, take flight with angry buzz as our shadow crosses their carousing place, only to settle in a cloud again the moment we have passed on. Withered bines of bryony festoon the way with clusters of great shining scarlet berries, and feathery wreaths of dead clematis wind up high into the towering thorn hedge, forming a misty canopy like a grey cloud tipped and bordered with sunlight. In the long grass under the hedgerow there is still a bright remnant of summer life and colour lingering among the green. Great trailing bines of ground ivy encircle the snowy campions waving aloft like truce bannerets, and purple mallows gleam like amethysts amid starry chickweed and green sprays of fumitory. Here bloom golden nipplewort and cinquefoil, and white pagodas of archangel rise among the mantling emerald of the bedstraw. Daisies are here too, large ox-eyes, and the smaller field flower with its crimson-tipped corolla, and ragged yellowheads of crowsfoot, once the sport of blue and copper butterflies, still bear up bravely against the shortening November days. Below, in the deep ditch, we can hear the music of running water, but great fronds of dead nettle bend over it and hide it in a shower of rosy blossom. Bending the head down low until it almost touches the green fern moss by the bankside, one can just hear the quaint rhythm and flow of the stream as it bubbles over its stony bed. Soft Eloian notes mingling and blending, but with a wonderfully regular cadence, so low and faint at first that the ear must be strained to catch the infinitesimal murmur, and then one clear note, like a silver bell, sounds out clarion-like above all others, and almost startles us with its full sweet volume of elfin music. Then almost silence again, as the clear spring waters murmur on in the dim green light below. The season of the leaf fall is almost done. The last drifting shower of bright November gold has descended upon Mother Earth, and the forest lies dank and dark in winter slumber. Yet though the deciduous trees have begun their long sleep, nature is yet alert and has set her ever-wakeful sentinels in every copse and wood. Though the great elm rears her bare, sombre branches aloft into the frost-laden air, the young ivy will darkly sparkle on the old trunk with its pale veneer of grey lepraria. The drooping larch, with all its fine crimson blossom of the spring and foliage of seeming evergreen, has yielded to the early frosts of autumn, and showered its golden needles on the brown earth, but the grand old Scotch firs will still hold up their billows of green leaf whorls when frost and snow and winter blast chain Mother Earth in icy manacles. And this old yew, every green feather bearing its rosy fruit, has behind it centuries of slumberless constancy, standing there green, unwavering, faithful since bluff Prince Hal was king. That concludes Chapter 10. The section continues with Chapter 11, Wildflowers of Winter. The pure keen air abroad, albeit breathed no scent of herb, nor heard love-call of bird, nor merry hum of bee, was not the air of death. By William Cullen Bryant. The north wind roars in the Scotch firs above our heads as we press over the heath in the misty light of the winter sun, and, higher still, solemn rooks are breasting the strong air current on their homeward way to the distant elm grove. Underfoot, the brake fern and the heather lie in dead, moist masses, and the hawthorns stand up black and gaunt against the fitful blue of the December sky. Everywhere around us the young gorse is springing up in clusters of golden blossom, and the broom is putting on its winter green. Scarlet leaves of bramble engarland the pools by the wayside, where the blackbirds linger almost until we are on them, and then start up with sudden noisy chatter and are gone. Soon we leave the undulating heath behind us, and the road winds between broad stubble lands and wooded hills. A few crows are lazily circling near the ground, and a shout or two or a clap of the hand raises a perfect army of tawny fieldfares and redwings from the groundsel in the furrows. Larks, too, rise like flying leaves, uttering their short, tremulous note of alarm, and a cloud of chaffinches sweeps up into the giant holly bush by the wayside, whence to take stock of us and to return to their feasting when we shall have passed on our way. Further on we pause to listen to the song of a robin sitting on the topmost branch of a young sycamore tree, all alone with his music, his rosy breast tinged with a stray beam of ruddy gold from the fast lowering sun. All the long year through he sings the same plaintive song, with its quick, tremulous bursts of passionate outpouring, and low, sweet twittering melodies. But when the nightingale and willow wren and all the rest of nature's vernal orchestra are once more in the hedgerow, he flies away to the solitary woodlands, and pours out his sweet song to the squirrel in the oak blossom, and we see him no more. Presently we leave the highway and follow the winding path which leads up through the arable fields to the wooded land above. As we go over the brow of the hill, the sturdy ploughman is turning his last furrow. He leans hard on his implement, shouting to his plodding team the while, and we see the blue of the sky re-echoed in the wet, shining clod turning slowly over in his wake. Now the path leads us under the spreading oak trees, the fallen acorns sprouting rosy red under our feet, and soon we are standing in the heart of the wood, breast high in the dead gold bracken. The chill north wind, gusty and boisterous, whose bitter grip we felt as we passed through the fields below, could follow us only a little way into this friendly shelter. But we can hear it surging and sighing in the tree-tops overhead, and watch the great ragged masses of snow-laden cloud drifting helter-skelter before it across the narrow sky space above. At this late season of the year, all the forest trees are bare and dark, save the oaks, which give the keynote to the wood. And from the rising ground yonder, we can see them stretching away in tumbled and ever-diminishing masses of dying gold to the far distance, where all is blue-grey deepening into indigo, and this again blending with the wintry skyline, dull red under its pall of sombre cloud. As we pause near a dean hole, down which a constant flow of dying leaves is being carried by the wind, a chaffinch goes dipping overhead with low chirp, and the chip-chip of a solitary robin sounds faintly in the juniper bushes. The wind moans increasingly. The cry of the kestrel sounds high up in the elm tops. The discordant note of a jay comes to us faintly from the grey ash poles in the coombe below. The white stem of a birch shows up like a ghost in the wood, and the narrow winding pathway is scarcely more than a succession of pools of water stained rich brown with the tannin from the sodden oak leaves. Farther on in the wood, all is quiet grey shading into black, starred here and there with a stray gold leaf more sturdy than the rest, left still clinging tremulously to its mother twig. As we pass through the sweet chestnut copse, we are ankle deep in the dead leaves, and the sound of our tread is like wading through running water. Above and around us all is quiet brown and sombre grey, but below every gnarled stump and twisted stole has its bright speck of colour. For this is the favoured haunt of the fungi, veritable wild flowers of winter. When the last yellow goat's beard has withered on its slender stem, and the bittersweet, with purple bloom and flaming tongue, is nothing but a memory, when you can only read of the pink of the dog rose or the clear azure of the speedwell, and the fair white garland of bindweed in the thorn hedge is but a mind picture to you, when even the gold-bosomed daisy and rakish dog-violet are nothing but germs under the clod, then from dying leaf and rotting twig and stem there springs up an enchanted vegetation, a sort of afterglow of nature, which rivals in vivid colour and graceful form even the children of summer sunshine at their brightest and best. Look round you as we press through the delightful old Kentish wood in the waning light. Close to our feet rises a perfect forest of pale yellow cones, like half-closed parasols, and here, enshrined in a miniature bower of drooping bracken, nestles a solitary dome of purest heliotrope. Hard by, a tapering amber column curves gracefully up through dead leaf and sodden twig, and presently we pass an old oak stump, nearly hidden under a broad spreading tabletop, red as blood itself. What can equal the delicate beauty of the smooth Agaricus odorous, china blue shading into grey, or this dainty funnel-shaped structure in brownish amber velvet with rosy upturned edge? Here too is deadly Luridus, red-brown and vivid blue with its swollen stem, and hard by the dark winter carpet of the wood is lighted up with palest flame-hued stars, bright colour, indeed, made all the more vivid by its gloomy environment. Yet leave these winter wild flowers to bloom where they grow. They are but Dead Sea fruit which goes to dust in your hand. The fairest, brightest of them all lives but for a single day, and then returns to the decay and dank putrescence which gave it birth. The slanting rays of the setting sun filter through to us in a cloud of many-tinted arrows of light, warning us that the day is dying and we must hasten from the wood. We take the path through the catkined hazels, and, as we regain the highway once more, the full glory of the short December twilight holds us spellbound in its dreamful radiance. All day long the fierce north wind has driven the ragged masses of cloud tumultuously before it, but now the last of the dense cumuli has scurried past on its long journey, and, save for a faint rustling in the topmost branches of the towering elm trees, all nature is once more at rest. A vast tranquil dome of ever-deepening azure looms above us, while the western sky is a maze of gold and crimson and palest limpid green, with vague mysterious islets and shadowy promontories in a sea of molten amber. But the dark mantle of night gathers swiftly. The last belated rook wings his way homeward with lazy caw. Lights twinkle here and there in the dim distance. They are ringing the chimes down in the little village under the hill, and as the sound rises to us in a flood of subdued harmony, the last faint glimmer of twilight melts into the dark, and we silently turn towards home. That concludes Chapter 11. The section continues with Chapter 12. Dull Days. The day is cold and dark and dreary. It rains, and the wind is never weary. The vine still clings to the mouldering wall, but at every gust the dead leaves fall, and the day is dark and dreary. By Longfellow. Out of the dark of the winter night comes the dim January sun, wading up through a film of watery yellow, thronged with broken, serried flecks of deepest grey. Then vague, misty forms of purple drift over the gold, but these in a moment are swamped by flying curtains of pale, fiery red, heavy with the young winter rain. Presently the light strengthens and reaches up to the dark multitudes of drifting cirri spreading over the sky from horizon to zenith, and borders them all with a fringe of glowing jacinth. Under the dawning light, the green of the hills is intense, but the valleys are filled with darkness, save where the great elms rise out of them and catch the drift of the purple light in their bare branches. But now that the swimming sun has breasted the hilltop, its sloping sides are dark in gloom, and the deep cleft shows its cluster of white cottages and grey dots of sheep in the lambing pens. For a moment the golden light floods the valley and distant hills. Then the grey, ragged rain drapery gathers fold by fold. Crimson and blue and jacinth fade away. The first pattering, driving drops strike the cheek with a chill touch in the hollow wind. The sun hangs for a moment over the hill brow, a dim white disk in a garland of grave clothes. Then rain, 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 and chill, shrill wind all the dull day long until the dark. Sometimes the dull day dawns in windless, watery gloom after a night of steady downpour, ceaseless and soddening. But here, in the heart of the wood, there is everywhere an indescribable buoyancy and glad promise in the still air, making the chestnut copse resound with the blackbird's fluting, and blending with the robin's silver cadence, a joyousness that songs of summer days can never know. Every velvet moss mound by the pathside seems more deeply green, and the moist, brown carpet of dead oak leaves glows with a brighter and a cheerier warmth. Masses of faded bracken lie like dim, brown mist in the hollows, and fill the wood with a ruddy light, as of dying embers. And the wood spurge stands up palm-like on its slender columns of curving crimson. Soft fingers of grey-green lichen reach out caressingly from every chink and cleft in the old oak stems, and drooping cords of honeysuckle light up the old wood with tufts of vivid green, as fresh as any growth of spring. The rain has ceased with the dawn, and above, in the lowering sky, there are grey gleamings all day long, and the great water-laden cloud forms widen and show clear spaces of glistening white between. But this is all, no blue and no sunshine, and presently, as the short day melts into the night, the lingering bird voices die away one by one, and the rain comes down again with all its old constancy of steady pour. To-day the great forest trees bend and sway in the northern blast like slender willow wands, and the keen strong air is full of a deep sonorous booming. Overhead great scurrying forms of flying grey stream away to the far south, and in the windward sky the dense clouds stand up in one great beetling cliff of towering blackness. Presently, far away in the lee of the wind, the driving storm rack parts for a moment, showing the fair blue sky in a setting of rosy white. And deep down on the skyline, shadowy sun-steeped clouds appear in a break of dim sea green, edged round with lurid grey. Once only the dull sky divides to windward, and the great sombre wall becomes darkly and luminously blue, its ragged edges bordered with a silver fleece, drifting off and breaking away in small flecks of radiant light. Then the rift closes, and the weird blue glint of stormy light fades slowly away. Now and again vague white undulations rise against the windward gloom sharply defined above, but lost in the general murky grey below, or, the flying storm drift failing for a moment, the sky above slowly clears into a broad span of misty azure, changing soon to a quiet pellucid sea of formless grey, with one bright break of deep zenithian blue right overhead. Then, as the scudding cloud forms throng over the sky again, all is once more black and dreary, and in the voice of the wind's wan moaning, the sunlit blue that was with us but a moment ago seems only a distant memory, dimly and uncertainly recalled. Down by the southern sea, when the tide is low, the dull winter day has a magic and a mystery all its own. At first the sky and sea and shore seem blended into one vague, shadowy curtain of drifting white, out of which come and go solitary gulls, flapping their slow, erratic way low down by the water's edge. Then the soft-blowing land breeze lifts the mist a little, and the air is full of a strange sighing as the slight waves of the quiet grey sea gently break and flow diagonally towards us over the wrinkled sand in undulating strata of crisp ripples. Here, where we stand, among the half-sunk rocks, with their soft, clinging tresses of golden green, the gloom is still unbroken by the mild winter sun. But far away out on the waters, the mist has lifted and divided, and the sunbeams break through and bar the shimmering sea with amber light. Sometimes, as the narrow cloud rift above it moves in the varying breeze, the golden bar sweeps to and fro like a searchlight over the grey waste of waters, or forms a broad shining pathway of gypsy gold, dwindling away and becoming lost in the dim blue trysting place of sky and sea. If for a brief interval in the haze and gloom of the day the dense clouds rend asunder, letting in the full bright glory of the morning sun, a wealth and mystery of colour becomes visible under the grey monotone of the surging, sighing sea. As each low wave rises to break, and just as its crest curls over and whitens into foam, the sunlight strikes through the clear convolution of water behind in a flash of emerald light. And as the slanting water purls over the receding wash of the wave that spent itself but a moment before, the golden light finds 1,000 opalescent gleams in every ripple and rill. The tide is rising fast, and this time the waters have flowed up to the rock on which we stand, filling the quiet pool at its base with its own hurrying agitation. And as the wave swings back, frothing and iridescent, it leaves the sand of the shore a mirror for the great rounded masses of cloud above and clearest blue between. So sudden is this transformation of dull brown sand to a gleaming maze of sunlit azure and snow, that the sky seems to have fallen down beneath our feet, and for a moment we are dazzled and blinded by the upward glancing light. Then the water subsides into the sand. The bright image of the heavens blurs and is gone. The swift, hurrying clouds rush together once more. For a moment the waters are bathed in a dim yellow glow. Then the mist gathers again swiftly in a great drifting canopy of grey, hiding sea and sky and shore, while the wash of the rising tide in the rocks around us fills the air with a hollow moaning, and warns us to leave our green-girt resting place, and to seek securer haven while yet the path is clear. That concludes Chapter 12, and is the end of Section 5. Section 6 of Sidelights of Nature in Quill and Crayon by Tickner Edwardes. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapters 13 and 14. Chapter 13. March Music. Ere on its sunny bank the primrose flower peeped forth, to give an earnest of the spring. By William Wordsworth. Up from the fallow land rises the lark, sweeping silently aloft from his hiding place among the blue veronica, until he clears the sheltering barrier of the hazelwood, and the stress of the free south wind bears keenly on his grey pinions. Then, with wings hurled back for a moment on the tail coverts, and crested head poised to the light, the first long wavering, joyous note of his new spring carillon comes bursting from him, and away he soars up into the sunny lift of the morning, intent only on his own bright melody. As he swings higher and higher into the blue, veering from side to side, yet never turning his front away from the breeze, the song rapidly loses its clarion power and quietens down into a steady flow of music, ever diminishing in volume as sight and ear are strained after him in his twinkling flight. After a while he seems only a dim grey speck in the sunny azure, yet his song is still clear in every silver note, though dwindled to a mere shadow of its former strength. Then, from much gazing, the tired eye fails momentarily to hold him, searching vainly to and fro for another glimpse of the tiny singer. Yet the faint voice still creeps down, though intermittently and uncertainly, on the lightest vibrations of the air. Presently, for a single moment, the straining eye just catches the dim point of twinkling grey once more, only to lose it again the next instant, and finally. Then the voice appears to die away wholly in the blue reaches of the upper air, and song and song-giver alike seem quenched and still. In the silence we wait, straining sight and hearing to their uttermost pitch, until at length one faint trill, the merest shred of sound, droops down haltingly through the impending light, and hovers for the fraction of a second on the remotest limit of the ear reach. Then the long silence again, and presently the shadowy note once more, this time clearer and stronger, and repeated again and again at shorter intervals, until at last the faint yet undivided song and the speck of grey drift downwards together by imperceptible degrees into the limit of the senses. Yet even now the bird is only visible when its shadowed flank is turned towards the view. When the sunny side swings into the line of sight, it seems for the moment to vanish into blue space again. Presently, as we gaze, we note that the twinkling flight has ceased. The wings are outstretched motionless on the keen air, and the bird lets himself down from the misty height by short slidings, like a spider descending on its gossamer thread. The drops become longer and more frequent as the bird nears the earth, wearied yet singing with all the old sweetness and strength. Finally, with a long swoop, he descends into the sunny fallow, and the bright melody is extinguished in the mantling grasses as suddenly as is the flare of a torch thrown into water. Ever since the sun rose over the distant verge of Blue Hilltop, the larks have thus kept up a constant ripple of music, following one another in a never-ceasing catch-song all through the long hours of the golden day. The lark seems ever to take the leading strain in the chorus of March music, yet every brake and bush rings with some individual song, distinct yet blending well with the general symphony of the young season. In the fast greening hawthorn bush a wren flits about from twig to twig. For good and all she has laid by her creaking note of winter, and the thicket is full of her slender spring song, 5 or 6 clear silver notes, then a rich trill or two, then the clear notes again, following one another in quick succession. All the time she sings, she flirts her tail up and down, and wets her bill rapidly sideways on the green twig between the stanzas of her music. The song of the great tit is everywhere in the budding trees, as he hangs head downwards in his rapid search for plunder. Marsh tits dart from branch to branch, uttering their sweet song like silver cymbals clashing to slow march time, and through the tangle of the briar a pair of bluebottles are chasing one another, gleaming like sparks of azure fire as they go. On every side the clear metallic call note of the chaffinch rings out, followed by his boisterous, overflowing song. The song of the chaffinch seems to have ever a finished, unvarying quality. Each stanza of it forms a complete expression, with always the same arrangement of trills and cadences, differing with the changing seasons only in the speed with which it is poured out, as the bird sits in the dead oak spray halfway up the trunk. In the gentle west wind and soft sunny morning, the chaffinch's song is more leisurely, and has in it a mellow, halting, serene note. But when the winter wind roars through the thicket, his song becomes turbulent and hurried, bubbling over with an apparent anxiety to be finished, yet repeated ever and ever again. It seems as much torn from the bird in stress of sorrow and unrest as are the first low melancholy notes of the nightingale, when in the summer dark she takes up once more wearily the burden of her long complaining. In the oak spray overhead, a robin has been sitting ever since we came to the shadow of the wood to bear him company. In his tuneful, wavering voice, there is still the old winter strain of melancholy discontent, and his song is broken as of yore with lengthened gloomy silences. But grudgingly and under grim restraint, he has at length allowed himself to join sparingly in the general chorus around him, and now and again he bursts out into as merry a carol as ever pierced the light of day. Yet he is ever a bird of half moods, and soon harks back to his wonted gloom of sad soliloquy. Away in the green-budded elder bush a blackbird is singing. Suddenly his mellow voice ceases. He drops to the ground and comes dashing over the dew-white grass, his black, shiny coat gleaming in the sunlight as he flies. Then, as he reaches the rim of our grey shelter, he catches sight of us and stops abruptly with his head on one side. For a moment he stands with his glittering eye fixed intently on us, then bursts out in a mocking peal of devil-may-care piping and vanishes into the deep wood. All the birds delight to linger for a while in the fallow land, with its breadths of flower-strewn sunshine and sheltering rim of woodland green. Here the grey thrush loves to idle a moment between his carollings, and the pied wagtail struts breast high in the sea of rainbow blossom. Starlings crowd among the figwort bloom near the brink of the meadow, every now and again raising their dark, snake-like heads warily from the grass, then sweeping up for a while into the adjacent hedge with their shrill note of warning. The sparrows are here in their thousands, filling the air with a continuous piercing note as they sail in a cloud from place to place. And the rooks, perhaps the most timid of all wild birds, dig and delve here all the long day through, keeping for safety well together in the centre of the field, and ready to take instant flight at the first caw of alarm from the black sentinel posted in the elm tree hard by. The fallow land is covered with trailing bines of veronica, and stretches away up to the distant brow of the hill in broad undulations of azure. Gold-tipped columns of coltsfoot rise in bright clusters among the blue, and bands of dead nettle bloom garland them in rosy drapery. Snowy turrets of archangel gleam here and there amidst the bright colour, and a few yellow heads of wild cabbage bloom show like golden torches above all the rest. This is the paradise of the humble-bee. Down among scarlet pimpernel and white-starred chickweed he clambers, with his black velvet body and broad belt of orange, over the brown earth and green strawberry tufts, disdaining nothing and finding in each unconsidered blossom something to suit his taste. His deep, soft humming is somnolency itself, and as he alights from his short, laboured flight with sudden visp, his gait assumes a drowsy complacency delicious to behold. Yet one blossom there is, strewn plentifully in his path, which he passes by, although it looks golden and tempting enough. I have watched him at work since first the spring sun wooed him from his winter slumber, but he never seems to take any heed of the groundsel with its little tight-girded bud tassels. Perhaps it is not worth his while to dally with them when there are so many wide expanded blossoms with the nectar all ready for the taking. With the approach of night, the rain clouds gather on the slowing wind, and the sun dips down in a mist of red raindrops, as the storm cloud trails raggedly away over the western hill. All the long day through, the March voices have filled the hazelwood with their flutings, and now as the weeping night shuts down over the broad upland, the voices seem to redouble their power and volume. All individual song is merged and lost in the general chorus, swelling up from the heart of the deep wood in one strong, clear flood of ringing melody. The sluggish dark creeps on, fold upon fold of grey moist drapery. Colour and form grow shadowy and dim. The red rain halts and ceases lingeringly. The patter of the water sounds only in the deep gloaming of the wood, where it is already night. Bats flicker and sway about overhead. Now and again a deep rich note cleaves the darkening air as a beetle drones suddenly by invisible in the dusk. Then, with the fast descending dark, the siren-like flood of woodland music abates by infinite degrees. One by one the clear notes drop out of the diminishing chorus, until at last no sound breaks the stillness of the night, save now and again the wailing cry of a stray plover, or the sleepy buzz of a solitary humble-bee plundering one last blossom of its treasure. That concludes Chapter 13. The section continues with Chapter 14. In a Country Churchyard. A simple name alone, to the great world unknown, is graven here, and wild flowers rising round, meek meadowsweet and violets of the ground, lean lovingly against the humble stone. By William Cullen Bryant. Here, in the little green acre of sleep, the mellow quiet of the Sabbath morning seems to brood over everything. The old churchyard lies on the sunny slope of a Kentish hill. Behind it rises the dark elmwood covered with a maze of purple blossom, and the shingled tower of the ancient church rears against this in a pyramid of cool grey light. Beyond the low stone wall of the churchyard, the green cornland stretches away in misty undulations to the verge of the cliff. Then the sparkling blue sea, where far away the white foam leaps on the dreaded Goodwins. It is early yet on the bright spring morning, too early by far for the ringers to commence their chiming, but the organist is here already, trying over the chants for the day, and through the open church door the notes of the organ creep out gently into the sunlight, and mingle with the voices of the birds ringing everywhere about the old place. As we pass by the half-open door, we enter the deep porch and stand for a while listening to the music as it comes stealing down through the deep rich gloom of the interior. At first, blinded by the flood of sunshine and colour which we have left only a moment before, we can see nothing but a great darkness, intersected with ghostly pillars and arches almost invisible. High up in the chill dark vault are glintings and flashes of colour, where the ancient stained glass windows admit a feeble glimmer of day. Far away in the chancel, a broad band of rainbow-tinted sunshine descends obliquely, lighting up the great brass eagle of the lectern vividly on its way. Where the player sits at the organ, the gloom is yet impenetrable. Nor does the music seem to come from a single spot, but to arise spontaneously from every cranny in the old place, rolling along the great vaulted roof above in a flood of mingled voices, half clear flutings from the organ pipes, half whispering echoes of other days roused from their sleep among the ancient rafters, to blend again with the new-born melody. As the eye becomes attuned to the deep half-light, other objects start into view. The monumental brasses on the walls, the line of altar railings with their gilded spikes, the ancient high-backed pews of carved oak blackened with age, the little stone pulpit clinging high up on the wall like a martin's nest. Presently, as the music goes droning on, we can make out dimly the bent figure of the organist, and above him the forest of pipes stretching up into the gloom with their rich blue painting and filigree of gold. For a while we stand just within the low multi-centred arch of the Gothic door, listening midway between rival influences. On the one side, dimness and mystery and a studied stint of colour and light and sound. On the other side, nature in her fairest, freshest green. A thousand voices of throstle and robin and clarion call of blackbird, glowing palpitating colour from a myriad blossoms springing unnumbered out of the brown clod, illimitable sun-gold poured down on the green earth in sheer diluvian wastefulness. The chill hush and gloom of the church suddenly oppresses us, and we turn to go. The organ ceases. The last echoing notes die away among the rafters overhead, and the crippled organist comes slowly down the great aisle, his crutch ringing on the stone flags as he advances. Together we pass out through the porch, where the white surplices of the choir cover the walls, then out again, more than gladly, into the free light of the uncloistered day. Down by the ancient lich gate, with its moss-grown thatch and carven pillar-work, a solemn old yew tree spreads its dark green canopy on every side. And here, on the rustic bench, encircling its gnarled ruddy trunk, it is pleasant to sit and watch the rich life of the young spring day welling up on every side. Under the old tree nothing grows in the deep shade, but the ground is covered thickly with the soft brown needles shed sparingly through the long years until the heaviest footfall is silenced in them. The lowest of the great green branches spring from the ponderous trunk at a height of 10 feet or more, spreading out widely and gently drooping to within a few feet of the ground, yet leaving an unobstructed view out into the little churchyard on every side. The great trunk appears to have no covering of bark. The red splintered surface, worn smooth and shiny by countless sitters of bygone time, seems to be akin to the very heart of the tree. Where some branches have been lopped off near at hand, this rose-ruddy colour of the wood is seen to go right to the core of the timber. Gazing up into the towering bulk of the foliage above, its unexpected depth of gloom almost startles us. No glimpse of the blue zenith can penetrate through the overlaying mass of green. Each radiating branch, densely laden with its dark, spiky leaves, slants down on the one below it, shutting out all lateral illumination and wrapping the old trunk in a never-ending twilight. Thus, on the brightest day, there lingers, cradled in the sombre bosom of the old yew tree, a haunting remnant of the night, where countless creeping things that shun the day can find perpetual sanctuary. The old organist has leaned his crutch against the seat, making a sloping rest of it for his withered limb. The music runs in his head still, for he sits gazing out into the sunlit green, his fingers drumming in slow time on the rough bench at his side. He is dressed in the shiny black, high-stocked fashion of half a century ago, and has a firm, rugged, clean-shaven face, with a mass of white hair thrown back from the high forehead. He is a very old man now. Ever since we can remember anything, he has been a familiar figure in our lives, and the sound of his crutch on the village stones will always be united indissolubly with our recollections of the quaint old place. This ancient churchyard near the ocean brink, with its quiet grey stones and shady pathways winding about in cool depths of evergreen, is his entire world, where he finds all the pleasure and pain of his uneventful life wandering among the familiar stones, each marking the resting place of one who has gone before him. His life lies wholly in the past. New faces come and go, but for him and his organ, master and servant, together grown old and decrepit in their dim corner of the world, there are none so real and full of throbbing life as the remembered faces of the quietly sleeping multitude of bygone days. As we sit thus, silently under the deep shade, all the scents and sounds of the awakening spring wander by on the gentle morning air. On every side the birds are singing, and the sunbeams pour down into the churchyard, filling the old place with a misty golden light. The close-cropped grass winds away in deep shallows between the old gravestones, and wherever the shade lingers on it, the dew lies white and thick. Crocuses fill every corner with yellow and mauve and white. Snowdrops hang down in silver sheaves over the sulphur primroses. Everywhere the celandine stars the bright screw moss with its amber gleaming. In the sunny shelter of the ancient wall, the red archangel spreads the bank with a flush of deep magenta, and, bending over from the green meadow beyond, the willows rear their cupolas of burning gold, where the bees have gathered in their thousands, oppressing the air with the rich burden of their labour song. Presently footsteps sound on the gravel walk, and the ringers go past on their way to the belfry. 5 tottering old men, grown white and bow-backed like the aged organist in half a century's service of the church. We look after them as they straggle along, one behind the other in an irregular line, until they reach the crazy old stone stairway which clings to the outer wall of the tower. Up this they climb in the same order, and vanish one by one into the low arch of the belfry door gaping darkly aloft in the ivied wall. And soon the chimes begin for the service of the day, swinging with measured beat out through the oaken louvres of the belfry into the song-laden morning. Then the old organist turns his ear expectantly towards the churchyard gate, as if for another well-remembered footstep. For a little while he sits listening and waiting with a puzzled, absent-minded air. Then his thoughts come welling back among the events of the past week, and, with a sigh, he points towards a distant corner, where a low mound of fresh-turned earth gleams moist and yellow in the flickering light and shade. And here, but yesterday, the old clerk of the parish was laid lovingly to rest, with 90 long years of life to his record. That concludes Chapter 14, and is the end of Section 6. Section 7 of Sidelights of Nature in Quill and Crayon by Tickner Edwardes. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapters 15 and 16. Chapter 15. Anemone Wood. Day, faster and more fast, o'er night's brim, day boils at last. Boils pure gold o'er the cloud cup's brim, where spurting and suppressed it lay, for not a froth flake touched the rim of yonder gap in the solid grey of the eastern cloud an hour away. But forth one wavelet, then another, curled till the whole sunrise, not to be suppressed, rose, reddened, and its seething breast flickered in bounds, grew cold, then overflowed the world. By Robert Browning. It was workaday in Anemone Wood long before the first red beam of sunlight had struck through the pine crown of the eastward hill. While yet the lagging night tide ran planet high over the earth, the lark had risen from the dandelions of the meadow hard by, singing as she soared, busily and joyously, until the bright ripple of her music seemed only as a star of song among the many stars that filled the night. Then the brief bright melody ceased for a while, and the silence and darkness linked hands once more under the flinching silver of the starshine. Presently, on the remote hillside, another and a kindred voice rang faintly up into the dark, and the first singer broke out again in answering melody, cleaving the dim silence with her sudden pealing. Then, from the hollow woodland deep, one slow faint note crept out on the veering wind, uttered as if complainingly at the flush of dawn breaking rosily on the distant skyline. Farther away in the deep thicket, the low flute-like call was taken up drowsily and repeated again and again from different stations far and near. Then the clear, strong voice of a blackbird rang suddenly out of the greying dark. The whole wood seemed to light up from end to end with a running fire of song. As we wait in the deep, resonant coombe, watching for the breaking light, we seem to be standing in a lake of dim, formless shadows, through which the slow wind veers uncertainly to and fro. Overhead, the young April leaves chequer the pale sky with their tangle of flickering tracery, and a faint rustle and stir sounds in the swaying tree-tops above, as if the old oaks themselves were waking from their slumber and reaching up drowsily to the gathering light. Underfoot, the pathway shows as yet only a vague shadowy track, which a little way ahead is lost in the dense grey mist of the undergrowth. With the fast gathering light, colour and form begin to show everywhere. The green of the young foliage lifts slowly out of the universal grey, and the clustering stems of ash and willow divide and let the creeping dawn slant pallidly down through their sombre trellis. Above, the sky seems to lighten by slow yet well-defined stages, as if we looked at it through layer upon layer of gauzy curtains, and these were being drawn away swiftly one by one. With every moment the track of the narrow pathway opens out more clearly ahead, and now we begin to make out dimly the white carpet of the anemones filling the long woodland aisles with their pale clustering blossoms. Towering high aloft, above every other growing thing in the wood, an old cherry tree rears its mountain of snow-white blossom on the verge of the hillside clearing. And just as the last flush of evening gold had lingered still in its snowy peak, long after the rest of the wood lay hidden under the grey rim of the night, so now the first ray of the ascending sun is already burning in its topmost branch, and gleams there like a ruby cresting a wand of silver, while yet the green wood beneath is untouched by the approaching day. Even as we gaze, the rosy light has crept down to other points in the white canopy, and soon the whole expanse of blossom soars gradually into the full radiance of the morning light. Here in the woodland clearing, the voices of axe and billhook are silent at last, and the woodman and his men have finished their long labour and are gone. Everything but the ancient cherry tree has fallen before their ringing onslaught, and on every side the timber lies in great square stacks, sorted and bound up in pimps and bobbins and faggots all ready for the waggon. In the broad, fair light of the sunny April morning, there is no lovelier spot on all the countryside than this. Every blossom of the spring is here in full, vigorous growth. The whole clearing is yellow with primrose yellow, and white with the pure, soft white of the anemones, all the purer for its faint, rosy tinge. Every stricken stump is garlanded with pale amethysts of dog violet and masses of wild strawberry bloom. Silver-tipped fronds of Sicily are springing fresh and green everywhere, and sprays of moneywort entwine themselves with purple heads of hemp nettle in every hollow of the hillside. Long canes of bramble arch over the moss-grown hazel stoles, and the fresh young trefoil sprays mingle their golden green with the brown and crimson of the winter-worn foliage. As we move along the old track of the path, every step among the green tangle throws a shower of bright dewdrops ahead. Already the mounting sun strikes hot on the face, although the morning has only just begun. Under the wild cherry tree, a small space is roughly fenced in, and it is this that we have come through the wood to examine. The hastily improvised fencing encloses a circular opening in the ground, and, bending over, we can see that it forms the top of a deep shaft about 4 or 5 feet in diameter. Straining the eye to the uttermost, we can see only a little way down into the gloom below. When a heavy stone is allowed to fall, there seems to be a long intervening silence before the dull thud, as it strikes the bottom of the pit, rises up faintly to the ear. All the surrounding woods are studded with these deep pits, or dean holes as they are locally termed, which strike down 60 or 70 feet into the chalk below, and then broaden out into a wide circular chamber. Sometimes there are 3 or 4 cave-like excavations surrounding the base of the central shaft. Rarely there is a low, narrow passage connecting 2 of the pits together at their lowest depth. Of their origin and purpose nothing is clearly known, except that they date from very remote periods. In all probability, they were made and used as secret storehouses for food in troublous times. There is one peculiarity which these dean holes seem to have in common. In nearly every case, a wild cherry tree is found close by, whose ancient trunk, gnarled and cloven and black with extreme age, seems, whether by accident or design, to mark the whereabouts of the hidden store chamber. Leaving the woodland clearing with its broad, sunny plain of light and colour, we re-enter the deep hazel copse by a different way. And now the narrow path begins to descend steeply, and through the emerald leaf trellis we catch the glint of water shimmering far below in the half-light of the shady coombe. Winding in and out through the dense thicket of hazel and alder, the stream flows purling between its steep overhanging banks, and every green-fringed glistening boulder in its stony bed draws from it a different note and adds one more clear voice to the bright treble of its flowing. Here and there, through the green roof of the wood, a stray sunbeam glances down on the dark wreathing water below, and makes a gold-brown patch on the deeper brown of its leaf-strewn bed. Where a young birch tree showers a rain of green drooping tendrils over a bend in its course, the water has hollowed out a deep bay under the very foundations of the tree, and here the descending roots form a quiet shady grotto into which the iridescent bubbles sail one by one out of the frothy turbulence of the stream. To the verge of the bank, on either side, the anemones crowd in the dim, mellow light, every drooping bell as yet tight closed and showing only the outer pink of its corolla. The pathway is almost hidden under its starry border of celandine, many of the yellow blossoms already bleached and withering among the dense mass of shining foliage. In every crevice of the moss-girt bank the wood sorrel has hung its pale triangle of green, each leaf-stalk holding, in its centre, one frail globe-like blossom, veined all over with purple like a butterfly's wing. Standing silently in the screening shade of a great blackthorn, we can see the white tufted rabbits scurrying to and fro on the steep, bracken-covered side of the coombe. Over the wood, a pair of plovers flit by with their quaint tumbling flight, so near that the musical fanning of their wings almost startles us in its sudden clearness. In the shimmering, swaying leafage above, all the well-known April voices pour out their sweet burden on the morning air. Yet one expected voice is still unheard, a voice we have watched and waited for ever since the first spring cadence rang through the purple of the awakening light. But even as we linger for a moment more in the green liquid radiance of the wood, one low silver note peals out above all the rest. Suddenly alert and straining the eye for one glimpse of the small brown singer, the clear, fresh voice rings out once more high up in the bursting green. One rich, plaintive, passionate note poured out as if in heart-torn weariness, and repeated lingeringly again and again. Then a long trilling burst of liquid music, magnificent in its sweet, wild purity, ringing down, moment after moment, through the hollow air, as if its silver torrent would never cease. It is the long-expected and awaited traveller, the first nightingale of the season, breaking once again her melancholy song-fast, and marking with her peerless music the full, fair tide of the emblazoned spring. That concludes Chapter 15. The section continues with Chapter 16. By Summer Seas. The ocean with its vastness, its blue-green, its ships, its rocks, its caves, its hopes, its fears, its voice mysterious, which whoso hears must think on what will be, and what has been. By Keats. For many a long, long year, the blackened wreck of the rosy morn had marked low tide in Desolation Bay. The name-board, picked up on the beach after the terrible storm of 1870, hung in the bar parlour of the Three Compasses, where its battered gilt scroll was often pointed out to chance sojourners in the dreary little fishing village. But nothing else was ever known of the abandoned schooner. In the howling dark she had driven into the bay, and the North Sea had beaten the stout heart out of her, and the yellow swirl of the morning had found her nothing but a forest of blackened ribs, bristling up darkly against the low sea line, frothing and tumbling beyond. When the slow, grisly tide had crept in to its uttermost reach over the solitary waste of the bay, there was still a wide expanse of yellow sand between the sea and the marshes. Beyond the marshes, higher ground loomed up distantly, where ages and ages ago a flourishing seaport had been. But the waters had receded year by year, and Costrell Haven had been stranded and weedy and forgotten while yet the 16th century was young. And now, standing on the old Roman vallum on the hillside centre of the town, and looking out over the green marshes with their dots of browsing cattle, over the hillocky sand beyond, where the yellow horn poppies grew, over the vast dark plain still farther away that the tide had left glistening with 1,000 pools. Right on the verge of the dim distance lay the foaming breakers of the exiled sea, with the jagged timbers of the ill-fated rosy morn just discernible, sticking up beacon-like out of the moaning surf. With long years of tide and tempest, the shore had silted up round the ancient wreck, and formed within her a level of smooth white sand, raised above the salt-soaked ooze of the bay. And here, when the tide was low, it was pleasant to watch the red sun down over the marshes, and to linger sometimes into the twilight, until the waters began to loop far into the bay on either side, and to wash dismally round the weed-wreathed pillars of our grim abiding place. Then, when the deep night blue came down swiftly from the sky, and filled Desolation Bay with its rich, uncertain gloom, strange solitary seafowl would lance screaming by overhead, or long strings of them wind round the bay in the deep half-light, uttering their weird catch-song as they sped. The way home lay through the slip-slop of the stranded pools and the sand that was already stirring under the fleck of the tide. Then over the sandhills, powdery and grass-grown, that had not tasted the salt of the sea for generations and generations. Yet the old wreck was never so dear to us as in the hot, still days of the summer, when the blue arch of the gull-kissed sea lay shimmering under the noontide sun, with its azure rim breaking gently now and again in delicate white lacework over the gleam of the yellow shore. Then the rosy morn became to us a temple, open to the sky and the sweet north wind, whose curving black columns were garlanded with seaweed, purple and green, and gemmed with many-coloured shells that seemed as if they had been cut and carved by the ocean maidens from the rainbows that chanced to fall into the deep. The white sand paving of our temple shone like marble under the summer light, and here and there stranded starfish marked it over with a gleam of orange. Little green crabs sojourned in the clear pools at the base of the pillars, waiting among the pearl stones for the waters to return and set them free. With every tide, some new wonder of the sea lay on the temple floor, or hung caught in the grey barnacles of the colonnade. Strange shells, with half the colours of a winter sundown shining opal-like through their pale enamel, convolute shells in silver white with delicate veinings of soft grey blue, double shells held tight closed by the creature within them, deeply corrugated and flaming with ruddy light. Seaweed purple and amber, seaweed golden and grey, seaweed streaming down from the water-worn timbers like ribbons of soft green silk, or drooping in a maze of rosy tendrils, fine as a woman's hair. Great brown branches, thick and knotted and gnarled, torn by the tempests from the forests under the sea, broad flowing draperies, tattered and translucent, glistening in 100 shades of vivid sensuous colour. Tide by tide came the glittering, sighing sea, ever bringing from its secret treasure house some new wonder of glowing colour or exquisite form to grace the amphibian temple on its brink. With every day the garland of sea blossom grew more beautiful, the smooth white floor more richly gemmed. And tide by tide we followed the receding waters, until at length our sanctuary lifted once more out of the green reluctant waves, and it was our own again. Here alone could the span of the wide heaven be realised. Here alone was it possible to be planet far from human things. Sky and sea and shore seemed no longer to hide from us the secret of their being. But in every wave and grain of sand and every breath that blew, a new and deeper meaning seemed to throb out joyously into the untrammelled sunlight of the summer day. Sometimes we worshipped in our temple, when the grey sea fog loomed low in Desolation Bay, floating breast level over the wrinkled face of shore and sea. Then the reflection of the sky would be masked out, and the true green colour of the water gleamed up from below like molten emerald. Ever and again the sun filtered through between the waving mist curtains, and for a moment, coming and going in a flickering, inconstant way, a dusky silver track was laid along the green. On these grey, shrouded, breathless mornings, everything seemed slow out in the solitary bay. The wash and swirl of the light incoming waves, and the water furrows filling up with clear flutings ominously near. The solemn warning bell in the distant harbour, always tolling, tolling. The flight of the grey gulls, slanting in and out of the misty roof above. Even life itself seemed to be slowing down and stopping for us out in the weed-locked cloisters of the ancient wreck. Once, when the tide was swinging into Desolation Bay at sundown, we bore a light rowing skiff over the waste of yellow sand and made it fast to the stern post of the Rosy Morn. Then, with our retreat secure, we watched and waited in our windswept temple for the rising of the waters and the gathering of the summer night. Behind us, the steep sky blazed in crimson fire. Before us, the advancing waters carried the same ruddy light in every ripple and crest. All the rainbow tints of our sanctuary were lost, for the nonce, in the one brilliant monotone. We stood on a floor of crimson alabaster, and gazed down a vista of ruddy columns to the tossing sea, encarnadined below. From every pillar the weed blew out on the sunset wind in a rosy fleece. Gulls filled the air above like a flock of crimson feathers. Far out on the ocean rim, the sails of a passing brig gleamed like flecks of red coral against the blue of the lifting night beyond. And when at length the tide had risen, and the summer day had paled and gone, when the last green garland of our sanctuary floated dimly below us in the darkening water, and the summer moon lay wan and golden-edged in the lap of the azure night, even then we loved to tarry in our frail coracle, and, gazing down into the dim obscurity below, wonder if we were indeed the only worshippers that came for absolution to the temple of the rosy morn. Whether, if we waited in the blue gloaming long enough, we should see lights kindling in the limpid depths, and see all the glowing colours that we knew so well start out again from the garlanded pillar and bejewelled floor. Whether we should hear the wild music of the conch shells ringing afar off in some flower-strewn highway of the deep, and presently behold the rightful priesthood of the sanctuary trooping in to nightly sacrifice, amid a chanting crowd of gay-robed acolytes, and ocean maidens clothed in purple sea anemones, and letting fall from their streaming hair the bright shell jewellery that we were to gather on the morrow from the marble floor. But the darkness never cleared in the deep below, gaze as intensely as we would. And on our moonlit way to the murky shore, the only ocean music that we heard was the singing of the sea as wave crest called to wave crest over our lifting prow, and the eddies from the oar blades filled up behind us in the darkness with a note as clear as a silver bell. That concludes chapter 16, and is the end of section 7. Section 8 of Sidelights of Nature in Quill and Crayon by Tickner Edwardes. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapters 17 and 18. Chapter 17. In the Track of the Gale. Straight from the floating island of Aeolus, where the misty house around them rings with fluting all the day long. It is raining again on the river, while yet a golden flicker of sunlight trembles over the deep pine wood. But the mighty southwest wind drives shadow and sunshine alike before it. Swiftly the bright errant beam loops back through the scurrying grey above. In a moment more the broad riverway blurs out and vanishes under the drifting tumult of the storm. Yet no phase of weather endures for long when the roaring southwest gale is abroad in the land. For a while the deep wind voices are hidden under the angry hiss of the rain. Then, with startling suddenness, the brief clamour of the torrent dwindles and dies away. The hoarse booming from the fir trees on the distant hilltop comes rolling down once more into the valley in a deafening avalanche of sound. Everywhere on sodden leaf and dancing ripple the autumn sunshine flashes out again, yellow and sparkling, and the spent rain curtain torn and riven by the fierce blast careering in its wake, drags away down the winding vista of the river's course, with the sunlight glimmering through its grey-blue depths in long parallels of dusky amber. On the steep river bank, the great ash pollards stand thickly shoulder to shoulder, crowding down right to the water's edge, and beating their golden tasselled branches wildly into the drab rush thicket below. And as the surging, hurrying wind ocean sweeps over them into the ruddy tinted wood beyond, it strikes out a liquid harp-like melody from each slender wand in the lashing green wilderness. In the towering elm tops, where the autumn colourings burn everywhere among the green, the voice of the wind is hollow and deep, and from the ponderous oaks, as they bend and swing before the blast, there descends a rolling, reverberating note like distant thunder peals. Yet the deep uproar in the mighty forest trees is only the bass in nature's vast resounding organ, for the boisterous kindly southwest wind draws a different note from every vibrating branch and stem, and finds music in everything. In the ivy that swaddles the great elm trunks with its darkling green, the song of the wind is ever soft and wavering. From the lashing holly hedge rings out a shrill metallic note. The brambles lend a hissing, sighing quality to the wild woodland music, as the strong gale buffets them rudely, setting their crimson-rimmed foliage jigging a mad tarantelle as it surges by. And the birch, the white queen of the hillside, leads the forest symphony, decked out in her pendulous robes of sun-strewn green. Be the wind ever so riotous, her song has always the same rich melody, one strong, quiet voice with the sudden tears in it, or the quick, faint echo of a sigh tripping up its clear cadenza unawares. Standing among the hazels on the verge of the wood, where the dark, dancing thicket glistens with a myriad points of light, we can see afar off the fair, green plain of meadowland in its misty hedgerow setting of brown and amber, and the great cloud shadows driving over it tumultuously before the breeze. Even in the far distance, where the woodlands stretch in scarce discernible undulations, the light is for ever varying as the grey shadows sweep over one by one. Alternately, the lines of billowing forestland rise into vivid brightness, then fade again into the general haze as the cloud form trends onwards. The broad spreading grassland before us seems, from our station on the opposing hill, to be nearly level. Only can we judge of its steepness in the sudden dash made by the shadow when it leaves the broom-covered foreground and strikes on the meadow beyond. The sudden downpour has driven the birds from their digging and delving in the new ploughed fields to the timely shelter of the wood. The quick, sharp note of the robin's war cry sounds everywhere around us, for this is a fighting morning with him. Great tits hang whinnying, head downwards, in the hazel boughs, where the young catkins are making ready to lower their ladders of gold-green light. And high up, in the wild gean trees which overshadow the copse, chaffinches dip in and out, uttering their silver twink twink as they fly. Overhead, a cushat is taking a shower bath among the wet leaves, and sending down to the soft carpet of the wood a cascade of bright raindrops from her fluttering wings. Only the lark, of all feathered things, seems to have scorned the friendly shelter, and with every lull in the deep voice of the wind, his steady song rings down from above like dropping music silver clear through the gusty brilliance of the keen October morning. All through the long summer days the hazelwood has lain dark and gloomy under its sombre roofing of green. But now the sheer nip of the blast has thinned the dense leaf canopy, and everywhere the light is breaking once more. In the springtime, before the green serrated leaves had wholly excluded the light of the sun, there was life and colour in abundance. Purple orchids glowed on every bank. The golden turreted archangel shone in every thicket. Under the new fronds of Sicily, the wood spurge reared its emerald blossom, twin crescents in a cradle of green, and the wild hyacinths lay like blue mist in every hollow far and near. Underfoot, the deep leaf carpet was covered with driven snow of wild cherry bloom, and everywhere the wood teemed with bright colour and strong young life. But in a little while the hazels threw down their crimson tassellings. The green leaves grew and interlaced overhead. The crowding woodland blossoms seemed to fade away with the retiring light, and the summer wood gloaming came at last to brood everywhere in the deserted cover. Then once more, by infinite degrees, with the passing of the season, the dense leaf shroud thinned and shredded away under the tooth of the autumn gale, until at length one golden bar struggled through at sundown and lit up the dark wood silence with its misty yellow light. And now the winter light is dawning everywhere again in the hazelwood, though the vivid colour and incense of the vernal blossom and the deep, busy hum of insect life have passed for a brief season away. From the wood by the riverside, the pathway leads over the new ploughed, fragrant upland, whence countless sparrows send up a doleful, never-ending twitter as they sweep from place to place with dull, sonorous whir, darkening the air with their thousands. Over the crest of the brown hill above us come the field workers in a long, straggling line, making for the shelter of the wood, for it is dinner time. And as the full blast meets them, they lean against it, and seem to be supported aslant on the strong air current, their loose garments streaming out behind them as they go. The sturdy rooks, startled by their approach, sweep up from their delving in the furrows, and as they rise above the hazel copse, the strong wind meets them and drives them back like falling leaves. Again they face the whistling, roaring current, and are again repulsed, when in a noisy crew they wheel about and stream away in the opposite direction, filling the air with a babel of deep cawing. Following the pathway as it disappears into the gloom of the dense pine wood, we seem to leave the glowing, tumultuous autumn morning suddenly behind us. Above in the dark wood roofing, the fierce gale beats out its loudest, hoarsest note. Below, there is a solid hush and stillness that envelops us like a dense atmosphere. In a moment, the shrill voice of the wind has gone. Around us, the dim air is scarcely stirring. We seem to be walking in a vast and solitary reception chamber, thickly carpeted with gold-brown fronds of bracken, and filled with unnumbered columns tapering slenderly up into the resounding darkness above. A hollow twilight seems to brood eternally around us, tinged with the dank, faint odour of a catacomb. On every side long corridors branch out into the ruddy gloom, marked here and there with a stealing wisp of grey vapour, until far away a tiny speck of light shows where each vistaed path breaks out into the rippling sunlight of the open day. Silence and resounding clamour seem to meet, without mingling, here in the heart of the wood. The roar of the gale in the dense pine canopy above is like the booming of a heavy sea on a rock-girt shore, and every bare grisly trunk around us shakes with the hoarse tumult raging overhead. Yet in the mute atmosphere below, the sudden scream of a jay startles us, as if it had rudely broken the death-like calm of a winter frost-bound night. And when a woodpecker hard by begins his monotonous double knock, it frets the dim silence as though, out on the green upland beyond, a windless, voiceless noontide slumbered the drowsy summer hour away. As we near the outskirts of the wood, the sudden light of the open ground strikes us in a dazzling flood, and we can see the wet lane beyond glistening like a silver thread as it winds away under the trees. Away to windward there is a lurid light in the tumbled cloud of dusk-wrought blue. The south-west wind is bringing up another rain curtain, and the dark water is already streaming from its ragged edge as it scars up the valley towards the wooded land above. For a moment more the pale autumn sunshine floods the broad landscape with its mellow light. Then the deep grey of the storm cloud scurries onward. One by one the green meadows in the checkered plain below are reached and submerged in the quick drift of the torrent. The dark shadow sweeps up the gold-clad hill and over us where we stand, battling with the raging wind. The first swift, slanting, pattering drops strike the cheek with a finger of ice. And once again the ringing forest voices are sunk and silenced in the shrill uproar of the inconstant autumn rain. That concludes Chapter 17. The section continues with Chapter 18, To the Shrine of Gilbert White. Now climb the steep, drop now your eye below, where round the blooming village orchards grow. There, like a picture, lies my lowly seat, a rural, sheltered, unobserved retreat. Me far above the rest Selbornian scenes, the pendant forests and the mountain greens strike with delight. There spreads the distant view, that gradual fades till sunk in misty blue. Here nature hangs her slopy woods to sight, rills purl between and dart a quivering light. By Gilbert White. Roses still bloomed near the churchyard wall, loose pink roses gently swaying on curving wands of green. Over the old gravestones far and near the mellow autumn sunshine wavered mistily. There was rook music above in the crisp morning air, floating dreamily by, and a quiet bright ripple of lark song everywhere. Out on the sunny plestor the sloping grass was white with the milfoil blossom. A wheel we had come to the little Hampshire village, while yet the lifting sun burned rosily in the tree-tops of the hanging beechen wood. The ploughman's team was already out on the smoking upland. Beneath lay Selborne, hidden under low-lying vapour, with the gilt weathercock of the church tower shining like a golden star above the winding mist. But soon the mounting sunbeams drew away the dim grey cerecloth abandoned of the night. Lean blue wisps of timber smoke began to curl up from every cottage chimney into the keen bright sunshine of the October morn. Sounds of human life broke out on every side. Lumbering wheels came echoing up the long vista of the High Street. From porch to porch rang out clear voices in early greeting, and window lattices swung open with jingling clatter. There was sudden commotion in the farmyards, where the poultry were crowding out, blinking and clamouring from their dark roosting places. Selborne was awake again, and setting about another day's business in the old, cheery, red-cheeked, burly Hampshire way. In the misty blue sky overhead there was no cloud to break the formless span. Yet, as we wandered through the sun-bathed silence of the little churchyard, a constant rain was falling, a rain of dropping leaves, for ever slanting and twirling down alike on mantling grass and lichen-gilded tomb. Yellow from the elm trees, amber from the chestnuts, grey from the spreading poplars, russet from flaming beechen bough. Red and russet, gold and grey, turning and pirouetting down through the dew-moist, hazy sunlight in a never-ending cascade of changing colour. Long ago the falling leaves had hidden the old grey cobbles of the church path, so that the heaviest footstep was silenced in them. And in the angle of the porch the vanished wind of yesterday had blown them up into a great brown heap that rose nearly to the sill of the little lance windows hard by. Every green mossy stone around us had formed a barrier for the drifting leaf harvest, and the wind had piled up its ruddy treasure behind, and left it there for the thrushes to scatter when we should have gone on our way. Eastward in the little churchyard, beyond the reach of the falling autumn leaves, there was open land as yet untenanted by the ever-gathering throng of quiet sleepers. And here, in a spreading plain of silver, the dew lay white and glistening under the still, strong radiance of the morning light. Only where the blackbird had left his track in it, sweeping away the white dew gossamer as he went, was the green of the grass visible. Crossing and recrossing and winding in and out, the pathway of his journeyings had chiselled out a pattern intricately through the dew veneer. Quaint curves and parallels traversed the bright sward everywhere, and knots and ribbons and rosettes of velvet green made a soft glowing backdrop for the rich impasto of the water drops. To sunward the glittering plain seemed colourless, save for a dusky golden sparkle here and there. But, seen obliquely, the surface broke up into a maze of gem-like gleamings, changing every moment into some new shade of iridescence, yet giving to the eye the general effect of silver molten white. And, with the strengthening sun-glow, the tiny drops were every moment drawn together on the swaying tips of the grass blades, where, gathering large to a fall, they seemed like gorgeous butterflies fanning their wings of amber and green and blue as the sunshine broke the fluttering light points up into a tangle of ray ribbons to the dazzled eye. Everywhere out on the sunny breadth of grassland, with the increasing heat of the morning, these hovering, bright-veined creatures were born into a moment's glory, trembling vividly through the whole gamut of rainbow colour, until presently, with one last burning flash of crimson, they dropped and vanished into the white dew-ocean below. Through the long dark hours of the night, we had journeyed towards the shrine we knew so well in fancy, yet, in truth, had never seen. With the chimes of midnight, London already lay behind us, twinkling in the darkness. At silent, slumbering Kingston, we had parted with the river, lapping by forlornly in its moonlit gulf below. Then Surrey hill and dale trooped by like dim shadows ever changing, yet ever the same beneath the quiet night. Mile after mile and hour by hour we journeyed under the misty moonlight, with the faint autumn breeze creeping chillily in every hedgerow and singing inconstantly in the dark waving tree-tops that blotted out the starshine overhead. And when, at length, the laggard day began to fret the steep sky with its dawning, and the rich autumnal tints gloomed out once more from every hill, wondering thoughts began to stir within us as the callow moon waxed dimmer and more golden, and the weary way ahead grew less and less. Whether we should find some stately marble in the public place, raised by Selbornians reverently in the Master's undying honour, or whether the people's tribute would rest over his grave perchance, within the quiet sanctuary where he stood and taught so many busy, peaceful years. Yet this would be unmeet, for then the swallows that he held so dearly could not circle round his resting place, as they must love to do on every shimmering, breathless summer day. And some, at least, must linger all the winter through, as he believed they did, to tend his grave. He could be lying nowhere but out under the blue heaven, free to the winds and the sunshine, with all the sights and sounds of furred and feathered life, and every bright-hued blossom of the seasons, ready in wood and meadowland against the time of his awakening. And when, at last, the golden chanticleer of Selborne gleamed out star-like ahead through the autumn mists, shining like another star of olden time, and when we stood, at length, within the precincts of the little God's Acre, with the busy murmur of the village behind us, and the dreamy sun-barred stillness of the churchyard stretched before, even then no inkling of the truth about him was revealed to us. We had seen no monument in the village way, nor on the broad plestor, where the stones of the pathway might well have been hollowed by his footsteps. Nor was there tablet or inscription of any kind on the old house where he dwelt and laboured for so long, though someone had newly fixed a little brown shining angel over the portal, with an open volume in its arms. Yet a passing waggoner had told us that he lay in the westward shadow of the church, and thither we went expectantly to see what Selborne had done there in his honour. Through the little wicket gate, and past the roses swaying so indolently on their long green stems, under the wide dark yew tree where the starlings were calling. Onward down the leaf-strewn pathway, through the never-ending torrent of chestnut, amber and gold, and round by the graveyard fallows with their glistening dew brocade. And then we deemed our quest an easy one. He must lie there under the distant tall grey monolith with the white medallion on its face. Selborne, we thought, had done him, indeed, some measure of honour, withal sparingly, nay, almost ungenerously. Yet, drawing near to read what compensation of glowing words were graven to his memory, we found an unfamiliar name upon the stone. And thus it was with every grave we visited. The carefully tended monument, with the asters blooming round it, was not his. The iron-railed marble, wreathed in pale everlastings, sheltered a stranger. The white stone cross, glimmering through the distant barricade of green, carried a gilded epitaph to some unknown. Every stone we visited told the same blank story. Bewildered, we journeyed on from place to place, threading our way reverently between the crowding tombs, bright with their garniture of lichen gold. At last we began to search among the lowliest graves that hid themselves uncared for amidst the couch grass and the daisies. And then, at length, we found it, half hidden under the thronging verdure. A little, mean, crumbling stone, moss-eaten, neglected, and almost illegible, but that some kindly soul had scraped the long accumulations of grime from the simple lettering G.W., 26th of June, 1793. Thus, to our shame be it written, is the grave of Gilbert White, the father and founder of English practical natural history. Edition after edition of his work appears, each outvying the other in its gold and purple. Yet his grave remains neglected, uncared for, down in the little sleepy Hampshire village. It is in vain to leave the matter to Selborne. There is an inconspicuous tablet to his memory within the church, and the inhabitants have given unto themselves a water supply and labelled it with his name. More they will never do. It is for the people of England, for everyone who loves the green country and the song of birds, to join in raising a fitting monument to the man who has done more than any other to help on our knowledge of God's creatures that move and have their being under the blue English sky. And if we of the motherland do not our duty speedily to Gilbert White, a great ignominy awaits us. For the Americans will step in and do our duty for us. A magnificent edition of his work will soon be issued overseas. Already Selborne is becoming the Stratford-on-Avon of the American naturalist. Let us, then, be up and doing what remains to be done, before the 11th hour shall have passed irrevocably by. That concludes Chapter 18, and is the end of Section 8. End of Sidelights of Nature in Quill and Crayon by Tickner Edwardes.